The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Claire Whitmore stood in the center of Blackridge General's main corridor, her scrubs still damp from the coffee Dana Keller had accidentally spilled on her an hour earlier. Around her, nurses whispered behind clipboards, while physicians pretended to study charts they'd already memorized. Dana's voice cut through the murmur like a scalpel through skin. "You're done here, Claire. Pack your locker. Security will escort you out in 10 minutes. No severance packet, no HR witness, just Dana's thin smile and the sudden silence of 30 people who'd worked beside Claire for 18 months. Claire didn't cry, didn't beg. She adjusted the strap of her bag and asked one question. "Are you absolutely sure?" Dana's laugh was sharp enough to draw blood. "Completely." Then every computer screen in the hospital went black. For 3 seconds, nothing. Then they flickered back to life, cascading red alerts flooding every terminal, every workstation, every administrative console from the ER to the executive suite. And in the center of each screen, one name pulsed in capital letters. Whitmore, Claire E. Authority level, Omega clearance. Before you scroll past this moment, before you assume you know where this goes, I need you to stay. Because what happens next isn't what you think. This story doesn't end where it starts. And the nurse they just humiliated isn't who they believe she is. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this truth travels. Hit subscribe. You'll want to see how this ends. The coffee had been deliberate. Claire knew that the moment Dana's hand slipped in the break room, sending the scalding liquid across Claire's chest and down her favorite pair of navy scrubs. Dana hadn't apologized. She'd simply handed Claire a single paper towel and said, "You should be more careful where you stand." That was 3 weeks after Claire reported the discrepancy in the surgical supply inventory. 2 weeks after she'd quietly documented the pattern of double-billed procedures in the oncology wing. 1 week after she'd noticed that certain patient complaints never made it past Dana's desk. Claire had been careful. She'd been methodical. She'd followed every protocol, submitted every concern through proper channels, kept copies of everything. And in return, Blackridge General had done what institutions always do when someone threatens their comfortable corruption. They'd decided she was the problem. The termination happened on a Tuesday, which felt almost insulting in its ordinariness. Claire had just finished a 12-hour shift in the ICU, the kind of shift where you hold someone's hand while they take their last breath, and then immediately pivot to starting an IV on a screaming overdose case. Her feet ached. Her back was a symphony of small pains she'd stopped acknowledging years ago. She was looking forward to the drive home, to silence, to not being needed for 8 precious hours. She'd been walking toward the staff exit when Dana appeared at the far end of the corridor, flanked by 2 security guards Claire didn't recognize. Not the usual guys. These 2 were younger, harder, wearing expressions that suggested they'd been briefed to expect resistance. "Claire Whitmore," Dana's voice carried across the distance, amplified by excellent acoustics and the sudden absence of ambient noise. People stopped mid-conversation. A medication cart halted mid-roll. "We need to talk. Now." Claire had walked toward them because refusing would have been theatrical, and she'd learned long ago that drama was a luxury she couldn't afford. She'd simply approached, set down her bag, and waited. Dana held a folder. Props were important in these performances, and made a show of opening it. "We've received multiple complaints about your conduct. Insubordination. Failure to follow administrative directives. Creating a hostile work environment through baseless accusations." Baseless. Claire repeated the word without inflection. Completely unfounded. Dana's smile belonged in a dental advertisement. Perfect teeth, zero warmth. "Your employment is terminated effective immediately. You'll surrender your badge, access cards, and any hospital property. Security will escort you to your locker and then off the premises." Around them, the audience had grown. Nurses Claire had trained, doctors she'd worked beside during codes and crises, administrators who'd smiled at her in meetings while voting to cut staffing ratios. Not one of them moved, not one spoke. Claire had expected this, had known it was coming the moment she'd submitted her 3rd formal complaint. But knowing something and experiencing it are different animals, and for a moment, just a flash. She felt the weight of their silence like pressure on her chest. She reached for her badge, unclipped it slowly. Dana extended her hand, palm up, waiting. "Are you absolutely sure?" Claire asked. Dana's laugh had edges. Oh, I'm certain. Unlike you, I actually understand how this hospital runs, how things work in the real world. You can't just. The lights flickered, just once. A brief brownout that made several people glance upward at the ancient fixtures. Dana faltered mid-sentence, then recovered. You can't just throw around accusations and expect. Every screen in the corridor went dark. The silence shifted quality, became denser. People looked at their phones, their tablets, the monitor at the nurse's station that had been displaying patient assignments a moment ago. Everything black. Dana's smile thinned. Maintenance issue, someone page IT. The screens came back on in unison, a synchronized restart that shouldn't have been possible across different systems and departments. But instead of resuming their previous displays, patient data, medication schedules, administrative dashboards, they showed something else. Red borders, federal warning banners, and in the center, repeated across every visible display, security protocol override. Initiated authority. Whitmore, Claire. E-clearance, Omega level. All systems now under authorized supervision. Dana stared. So did everyone else. Claire felt 30 pairs of eyes swing back to her, searching for an explanation she had no intention of providing yet. That's. Dana's voice cracked slightly. She swallowed, started again. That's obviously a malfunction. Someone hacked. Check your terminal. Claire's voice was quiet. She hadn't moved from where she stood, hadn't touched anything, hadn't made any dramatic gestures. Any terminal, log in. Try to access my employment file. Dana pulled out her phone instead, thumbs moving quickly across the screen. Her expression went from irritated to confused to something that might have been fear. She looked up at the nearest wall-mounted display, which now showed a cascade of file directories unlocking in rapid succession. Payroll records. Contract amendments, internal memos flagged as confidential, incident reports that had been marked resolved without investigation. Every piece of digital paperwork the hospital had tried to bury was suddenly accessible, suddenly visible, suddenly time-stamped and attributed. What did you do? Dana's question came out barely above a whisper. Me? Claire tilted her head slightly. I got fired, remember? I'm just standing here. A surgical resident Claire knew vaguely. Marcus, maybe Mark, had his tablet out and was scrolling through something with widening eyes. Dr. Keller, these are patient safety complaints going back 3 years. They're all marked resolved, but there's no documentation of any corrective action, just your signature closing them. Those files are restricted. They were. Another voice. Sarah Chen from Pediatrics reading her phone screen. Holy shit, Dana, you've been altering time cards? We've had systematic wage theft for. This is a security breach. Dana's voice climbed an octave. Someone call IT. Call building security. This is unauthorized access of. The overhead PA system crackled to life, but instead of the usual soft chime before announcements, it emitted a sharp, military-grade alert tone. 3 short bursts. Pause. 3 more. Every physician over 40 recognized it immediately. Several of the nurses did too. It was the old civil defense pattern, the one they'd phased out decades ago, but that anyone with military or emergency services background would know instantly. The alert repeated. Then an automated voice, calm and utterly mechanical. Attention all personnel. This facility is now under temporary federal oversight. All non-emergency activities are suspended pending review. Department supervisors report to your stations and await further instruction. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Dana turned in a slow circle, looking for someone to contradict the voice, someone to explain that this was impossible. We're a private hospital. Federal oversight doesn't just. You can't just. Claire finally moved. Just one step forward, but it drew every eye. You asked if I was sure. Earlier, when you fired me. This is insane. Whatever you did, you're going to prison for. I filed my complaints through proper channels. Claire's voice remained level, almost gentle. 3 formal reports to administration, 2 to the State Health Board, 1 to the Office of Inspector General for Medicare Fraud. You ignored the first batch, lost the second, and the third. She paused. The third triggered an investigation that's been running for 4 months. The blood drained from Dana's face in a wave visible even under the harsh fluorescent lighting. I'm a nurse, Claire continued. I'm good at my job. I care about my patients, but that's not all I am. She reached into her bag, slowly, deliberately, giving the security guards time to tense and then realize she wasn't a threat, and pulled out a different ID badge. This one was heavier, with a holographic seal and a photograph that looked similar to her current appearance but sharper somehow, more official. Lieutenant Claire Whitmore, U.S. Army Nurse Corps, Specialized Medical Investigation Unit. She held it up so the nearest camera could capture it clearly. I've been embedded here since January of last year. Undercover placement to investigate systemic billing fraud, patient care violations, and administrative corruption at medical facilities receiving federal funding. The silence was absolute now. No whispers, no shuffling feet, just the quiet hum of ventilation systems and the occasional beep from patient monitors in nearby rooms. Marcus found his voice first. You're military? This whole time? Army Reserves, currently on active investigative duty. Blackridge General receives approximately $42 million annually in Medicare and Medicaid reimbursements, which means it's subject to federal oversight. Claire tucked the badge away. Which means when someone reports irregularities in how those funds are used, we pay attention. Dana's hands were shaking, actual visible tremors. You had no right to. This is entrapment. This is public service. Claire cut her off. You want to know what baseless accusations look like? I can show you, because I have recordings, dates, times. I have documentation of every conversation where you ordered staff to falsify records, every meeting where you approved billing for procedures that never happened, every patient complaint you deleted. She pulled out her phone, tapped the screen twice, and held it up. Dana's voice emerged from the speaker, tinny but unmistakable. Don't care what actually happened. I care what the chart says happened. If that family pushes back, we settle quietly and bury the file. That's how this works. That's how we stay profitable. The recording continued for 15 seconds, 20. Long enough for context. Long enough for deniability to evaporate. Dana lunged for the phone. One of the security guards, the taller one, caught her arm. Not roughly, but firmly. Ma'am, I don't think that's a good idea. You work for me. Dana tried to pull free. Actually, the guard said, we're contracted through Davidson Security, and about 10 minutes ago, we got a call from our supervisor telling us to secure this floor and await federal officers. So technically right now, we don't work for anyone in this building. As if on cue, the main elevator chimed. The doors slid open and 4 people stepped out. 3 wore navy digital camouflage, unusual for a hospital setting, but unmistakable. The 4th wore a dark suit that screamed federal agent even without the badge he held up as he approached. Lieutenant Whitmore? The suit nodded to Claire. Commander Graves, we spoke last week. Sir? Claire straightened slightly. Not quite standing at attention, but close. Is the site secure? Yes, sir. All digital evidence has been preserved. Local authorities have been notified per protocol. Primary subject is cooperating. She glanced at Dana, who had gone very still. More or less. Commander Graves surveyed the corridor full of frozen medical staff. Anyone else we need to be concerned about? Dr. Richard Novak, Chief Financial Officer. Michelle Torres, Director of Patient Services, both directly involved in the billing scheme. And Claire pulled a small notebook from her pocket, flipped it open. Approximately 7 physicians who knowingly submitted false procedure codes. I have the full list in my report. Jesus Christ, someone muttered it from the back of the crowd. Claire couldn't identify who. Graves gestured to the 3 service members. Lockdown protocol. Start with executive offices and financial systems. Preserve everything. To Claire. You've done good work here, Lieutenant. Clean operation. Thank you, sir. Dana had been silent for almost a minute, which might have been a personal record. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded scraped raw. You can't do this. I have rights. I want a lawyer. You absolutely have rights, Graves agreed. And you'll have access to legal counsel as soon as we're finished with the preliminary questioning. Right now, you're not under arrest. You're simply being detained as a material witness in an ongoing federal investigation. His smile was professional, empty. which means you get to sit in a room with us and answer questions. Voluntarily, of course. I'm not answering anything without, that's your choice. He cut her off smoothly. But I should mention that we've already secured warrants for your personal devices, your home computer, and your office systems. We have testimony from 12 employees documenting your directives. And we have Lieutenant Whitmore's recordings, which include some truly fascinating conversations about how to disguise kickback payments from pharmaceutical suppliers. Dana's legs seemed to give out slightly. She caught herself against the wall. Claire watched without expression. She'd imagined this moment dozens of times during the long months of working double shifts and pretending not to notice when Dana would alter schedules to punish nurses who questioned her. She'd rehearsed what she might say, how she might feel. Vindicated, maybe. Triumphant. Instead, she mostly felt tired. Why? The question came from Sarah Chen, still clutching her tablet. Why go through all of this? Why not just investigate from the outside? Claire turned to face her. Sarah had been kind when Claire first started, had shown her where supplies were kept, which attending physicians were approachable, which pharmacy techs could expedite urgent orders. They'd eaten lunch together sometimes. Because healthcare fraud isn't like other crimes, Claire said. It's not dramatic, it's not sudden. It's 1,000 small decisions that seem reasonable in the moment. One altered code here, one disappeared complaint there. Death by 1,000 cuts, except the patient is the institution and the people who need it. She paused. You can't catch that from outside. You have to live it, document it, prove the pattern. But you, Sarah's voice caught, you were here during the Mendez Code. You saved that kid's life. You stayed 4 hours past your shift to make sure he was stable. Was that fake? No. Claire's response was immediate. Nothing I did as a nurse was fake. Those were real patients, real emergencies, real care. Then how do you just... Sarah gestured vaguely at Dana, at the federal agents, at the chaos they'd unleashed. How do you work beside us for 18 months and not tell anyone? Because if I told you, I'd compromise the investigation. And if I compromised the investigation, Dana and everyone else involved would destroy evidence, intimidate witnesses, and continue stealing from the hospital and defrauding the government. Claire's voice gentled slightly. I know you don't understand, but the reason I could do my job as a nurse, the reason I could focus on patients, was because I knew eventually this moment would come. Eventually, the truth would matter. Commander Graves cleared his throat. If we're done with philosophy hour, I need to get Dr. Keller processed. Lieutenant, I'll need your preliminary report by 1800 hours. Yes, sir. Already drafted. He nodded and gestured to Dana. Dr. Keller, if you'll come with me. For a moment, it seemed like Dana might resist, might scream or collapse or do something that would force the situation into ugliness. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and walked toward the elevator with her head up, playing the role of wronged administrator even as federal agents flanked her. Just before the elevator doors closed, she looked back at Claire. You'll never work in healthcare again. I'll make sure everyone knows what you did, what you are. I'm a nurse who followed the law, Claire replied, and a soldier who completed her mission. I'm fine with people knowing that. The doors slid shut. The corridor remained frozen for another beat. Then, like someone had released a pause button, everyone started moving and talking at once. Phones appeared. Hushed conversations erupted into arguments about who knew what and when. The 3 service members moved efficiently through the crowd, politely but firmly directing people away from certain areas. Claire stood in the center of it all, holding her bag, still wearing her coffee-stained scrubs. Marcus approached cautiously. So, are you leaving? Or are you still working here? Or... My assignment was to document and testify. That's complete, so yes, I'm leaving. Just like that. Just like that. He shook his head slowly. For what it's worth, you're the best nurse I've ever worked with. The Mendez kid, Sarah's right. You saved his life. Caught the sepsis before anyone else even suspected. And that makes this... He stopped. I don't know what this makes it. Complicated, Claire offered. Yeah, that. She wanted to say something meaningful. Something that would help him process what had just happened, that would explain how you could care deeply about patients while simultaneously executing a federal investigation. But she didn't have words for that, and even if she did, he probably wasn't ready to hear them. Instead, she said, take care of the patients on the 4th floor. Mrs. Alvarez in 412 needs her pain management adjusted. She's afraid to ask because she thinks it makes her weak. And the new admit in 408 has family that needs translator services, but they won't request it because they're worried about immigration status. Marcus blinked. You're giving me patient reports? Someone needs to know, and you're a good doctor. You'll make sure they're taken care of. His throat moved as he swallowed. Yeah. Okay. Claire walked toward the staff exit. People parted for her automatically, creating a corridor within the corridor. Some stared, some averted their eyes. A few nodded slightly, gestures she couldn't quite interpret. Sarah caught up with her at the door. Claire, wait. She turned. That thing you said, about the truth mattering eventually. Sarah's eyes were wet. I reported an incident 6 months ago, a medication error that almost killed someone. It just disappeared. No investigation, no follow-up. I thought I'd done something wrong, filed it incorrectly, or... You didn't. Claire kept her voice gentle. I saw your report. It's in the evidence file now. There will be a real investigation. Because of you. Because you had the courage to speak up first. Claire adjusted her bag strap. That matters more than you think. She pushed through the door into the parking lot. The afternoon sun was aggressive after the fluorescent dimness of the hospital, and she had to pause to let her eyes adjust. Her car was parked in the far corner of the lot, where she'd left it 12 hours ago. It felt like longer. She'd made it halfway across the asphalt when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered anyway. Lieutenant Whitmore, this is Special Agent Brooks, FBI. Commander Graves asked me to reach out regarding your testimony schedule. I can be available starting tomorrow. Actually, we need you back inside the hospital in approximately, a pause, probably checking a clock, 40 minutes. We've encountered something unexpected in the financial systems. Claire stopped walking. What kind of unexpected? The kind where the fraud goes deeper than Medicare billing. We've found evidence of a secondary set of books, offshore accounts, and connections to 3 other hospitals in the network. Brooks' voice carried a thin edge of satisfaction. Dr. Keller wasn't running a local scheme. She was part of something much bigger. How much bigger? Preliminary estimate? North of 200 million over 5 years. Claire closed her eyes, opened them, looked back at the hospital building, where windows reflected the afternoon sun and gave away nothing. I'll turn around. Appreciate it. We're setting up a command center in the administrative conference room, 2nd floor. I know where it is. She ended the call and stood in the parking lot, feeling the weight of what Brooks had just revealed. 200 million. Multiple facilities. This wasn't a corrupt administrator making bad choices. This was organized, deliberate, professional. She thought about these hours she'd spent documenting Dana's actions, the careful records, the recorded conversations. She'd believed she was building a case against one person's greed and negligence. She'd been wrong. This wasn't the ending. It was barely the beginning. Claire turned and walked back toward the building, where federal agents were systematically dismantling 18 months of lies, and every screen still carried her name in red letters. Behind her, the sun continued its slow descent toward the horizon, indifferent to revelation or consequence. Inside, someone would be panicking right now. Not Dana. She was already contained. But whoever Dana reported to, whoever had set up the offshore accounts and the secondary books, whoever had built a system sophisticated enough to hide a 9-figure fraud across multiple facilities. They knew now. Knew that Claire Whitmore wasn't just a nurse who'd gotten too curious. Knew that the federal government had someone inside. Knew that the quiet woman in coffee-stained scrubs had just collapsed the first domino in what was apparently a very long chain. Claire reached the door and paused with her hand on the handle. Through the glass, she could see movement, people rushing past with files and equipment, the organized chaos of a crime scene being processed. Her phone buzzed again. Different number this time. She recognized it. Her actual commanding officer, not Commander Graves. Ma'am? Whitmore. I'm hearing interesting things about Blackridge General. It's developing, ma'am. We've uncovered connections to... I know what you've uncovered. That's why I'm calling. A pause. How deep do you want to go? Claire understood the question. She'd completed her original assignment. She could testify, file her reports, and move on to the next posting. Or she could stay in this, follow the threads that were unraveling, see how far the corruption actually reached. She thought about Mrs. Alvarez in room 412, afraid to ask for pain relief. About the Mendez kid who'd almost died because Dana had cut nursing ratios to improve quarterly numbers. About every patient who'd received substandard care so someone could pad an offshore account. As deep as it goes, Claire said. That's what I thought you'd say. You're reassigned as of now. Full support, full authorization. Build the case. Bring them all down. Yes, ma'am. The call ended. Claire pulled the door open and walked back into the chaos, where her name still glowed on every screen and the truth was just starting to bleed through decades of careful lies. Somewhere in the building, someone's phone was ringing. An encrypted line. An urgent call to report that everything had just gone catastrophically wrong, that the quiet nurse had turned out to be something else entirely. Claire hoped they were scared. She hoped they were scrambling. She hoped they understood that the woman they'd thought they could simply fire and forget had just become the thing they should have feared all along. She walked past security, past the federal agents, past the staff who still didn't quite know how to look at her. She walked into the administrative conference room where computers had been set up and evidence was being cataloged. Commander Graves looked up as she entered. That was fast. I was in the parking lot when Brooks called. Seemed easier to come back than explain to my car why we were turning around. She dropped her bag on an empty chair. Show me what you found. He pulled up a laptop displaying a complex network diagram. This is the official corporate structure of MedLink Healthcare Services. Owns 7 hospitals, including Blackridge, clean, boring, everything files correctly with the IRS. He tapped a key. The diagram changed, new connections appearing in red. This is what we found in Keller's encrypted files. Shadow corporate entities, layered offshore accounts, automated fund transfers disguised as equipment purchases and consulting fees. Claire studied the screen. Who's at the top? Still tracing, but whoever it is has been doing this for at least a decade, maybe longer. And Dana? Middle management. She ran the day-to-day at Blackridge, kept employees quiet, maintained the appearance of legitimacy. But she took orders from someone. He looked at Claire directly. Someone who's going to be very interested in finding out who you really are. Let them look. Claire pulled out a chair and sat down. I'm done hiding. Outside the window, the sun touched the horizon. Inside, the investigation was just beginning. And somewhere between the official records and the secret accounts, between the corrupted files and the hidden conversations, the truth waited. All they had to do was dig deep enough to find it. The conference room smelled like burnt coffee and the particular staleness that came from sealed windows and too many bodies in one space. Claire had been staring at financial records for 3 hours straight, and her eyes felt gritty. Across the table, Commander Graves was on his 4th phone call of the evening, his voice a low rumble punctuated by occasional sharp questions. Special Agent Brooks sat 2 chairs down, working through Dana's email archives with the methodical patience of someone who'd done this before. Every few minutes, she'd pause, screenshot something, and add it to a growing folder labeled Chain of Command. Here! Brooks turned her laptop so Claire could see. Email from Keller to someone named J. Matheson. Dated 3 months ago. Per our discussion, the Q2 adjustments have been implemented. Projected savings align with your targets. Awaiting confirmation on the Hartford expansion timeline. Claire read it twice. Hartford's not part of MedLink's public portfolio. No, it's not. Brooks pulled up another window. But if you cross-reference with these property records, she highlighted a section. MedLink Holdings LLC purchased Hartford Medical Center last October. The sale was never announced. The facility still operates under its original name. They're hiding acquisitions. Claire felt something cold settle in her stomach. Buying hospitals off the books. Or through enough shell companies that it looks legitimate until you really dig. Brooks scrolled through more emails. And J. Matheson appears 93 times in Keller's correspondence, always giving directives, never asking questions. Graves ended his call and leaned back in his chair hard enough that it creaked. NCIS is pulling records from the other MedLink facilities. We should have preliminary data by morning. NCIS. Claire looked up. This is a Navy investigation now. 2 of the hospitals in the network are near major naval installations. If they're defrauding Medicare, they're also defrauding TRICARE, which makes it our problem. He rubbed his face. Also means we have jurisdiction and resources. FBI's already stretched thin. Brooks snorted. Translation: the Navy doesn't like looking stupid, and if military families got screwed in this, someone's going to burn. That too. Graves didn't deny it. Whitmore, what do you know about Hartford Medical? Claire thought back through 18 months of overheard conversations and documents she'd cataloged. Dana mentioned it twice that I remember. Both times she was on the phone, thought she was alone. She said something about Hartford being more complicated than Blackridge, that the existing staff there had legacy attitudes that needed adjustment. Legacy attitudes, Brooks repeated it flatly. That's code for employees who might actually report problems. Probably. Claire pulled up a map on her tablet, marked the locations of all 7 MedLink facilities. Blackridge is the smallest, 120 beds, mostly routine procedures. Hartford's bigger, close to 300 beds, trauma center, teaching hospital affiliated with the state university. Bigger operation, more money moving through. Graves studied the map. Also harder to hide irregularities when you've got residents and medical students rotating through. Unless you control who gets hired and who gets rotated where. Claire zoomed in on Hartford's location. Dana used to brag about how MedLink had revolutionized staffing efficiency. Her words. She meant they could move personnel between facilities without going through normal hospital credentialing processes. Brooks stopped typing. That's not legal. It is if you structure it right. Make all the hospitals technically part of one corporate entity, establish internal transfer protocols, get the state medical board to sign off on reciprocal credentialing. Claire had read the policy documents months ago, filed them away as interesting but not immediately relevant. On paper, it looks like streamlining. In practice, it means they can silence dissent by threatening to transfer you somewhere inconvenient, or fire you and blacklist you across the entire network. Graves picked up his coffee, grimaced at the temperature, and drank it anyway. How many employees know about the internal transfer policy? Most, probably, but they wouldn't see it as threatening. It's sold as opportunity, work at different facilities, gain experience, advance your career. Claire remembered the orientation packet from her first week. Professional development opportunities across the MedLink family. The threat only becomes obvious if you make yourself a problem. Her phone buzzed, text from a number she didn't recognize. This is Sarah Chen. I know you're probably busy, but I need to talk to you. It's important. Claire showed the screen to Graves. Sarah's one of the pediatric nurses. She was there when Dana got detained. Could be she wants to cooperate. Could be she's panicking. He shrugged. Your call. Claire typed back. Can talk briefly. Where are you? The response came immediately. 4th floor break room, please. I'll be back in 10 minutes. Claire stood, pocketed her phone. If she knows something, better to hear it now than have her spend all night convincing herself to stay quiet. Graves waved her off. Go. Brooks and I will keep excavating. The hospital had settled into the strange quiet of evening shift. Fewer visitors. Dimmed hallway lights. The particular tension that came from knowing federal agents were systematically dismantling your employer's infrastructure. Claire took the stairs instead of the elevator, partly for speed and partly because she needed the movement. Sarah was alone in the break room, sitting at the small table with her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she didn't appear to be drinking. She looked up when Claire entered, and her expression was difficult to read. Not quite afraid, not quite angry, somewhere uncomfortable in between. Thanks for coming. Sarah's voice was tight. Claire sat down across from her. What's going on? I need to know something. Sarah met her eyes directly. That recording you played. The one where Dana talked about burying files and settling quietly, was that from the Brennan case? The name triggered immediate recognition. Jessica Brennan, age 4, admitted with pneumonia that progressed to septic shock because the attending physician, following Dana's directive to reduce expensive testing, had waited too long to order cultures. The child had survived, but barely. Claire had been the one to escalate when the physician refused to act, and she documented everything. Yes. Sarah's hands tightened on the cup. I was assigned to Jessica. I knew something was wrong, but the attending kept saying she was fine, just monitor her. And when I pushed, Dana pulled me aside and told me I was being dramatic, that I needed to trust the physician's judgment. She swallowed. I almost didn't go back to check. Almost listened. But you did check. I did. And you were already in the room, had already called the code. You saved her life, and I—" Her voice cracked. "I let Dana convince me I was wrong, that I was overreacting." Claire kept her tone even. "You're not a physician. The attending should have ordered the cultures hours earlier. That's not on you." I could have pushed harder, could have gone over Dana's head. To who? The administrator who was actively covering up patient safety issues? Claire leaned forward slightly. "Sarah, Dana created a system where speaking up meant risking your job, where questioning authority got you labeled as difficult. You're not responsible for that. But you spoke up. I had backup you didn't know about. I had a federal badge and legal protection and orders to document everything." Claire softened her voice. "You had a mortgage and student loans and a boss who'd proven she'd punish anyone who challenged her. Those aren't the same situations." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then, "The Brennan family settled. I remember Dana mentioning it. She said they were unreasonable, but the lawyers recommended paying them off to avoid publicity." She looked up. "How much did they get?" $50,000. Standard medical malpractice nuisance settlement. "That's nothing. Jessica was in the ICU for 2 weeks. She'll have lung issues for the rest of her life because the physician waited too long to treat her." I know. Claire had watched the Brennan family walk out of the hospital with their daughter, relief and trauma etched equally into their faces. She'd wanted to tell them it wasn't supposed to happen that way, that someone should have acted sooner, that their settlement barely covered a fraction of what they deserved. "It's in the evidence file now. There'll be a real review." "Will it matter? Jessica's still going to have damaged lungs. The family still got screwed." "Maybe, but maybe it'll prevent the next case, the next family." Claire spread her hands. "That's the best I can offer." Sarah nodded slowly. Then she reached into her scrub pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This is why I needed to talk to you. I went looking through my old notes after you left. I keep a personal log of my shifts. Helps me remember patients when I'm writing evaluations." She unfolded the paper and slid it across the table. "I found something." Claire scanned the handwritten notes, dates, patient names, admission reasons, and highlighted in yellow. Dr. Richard Novak visited Jessica Brennan's room twice during her admission, not her attending, asked to see chart both times, didn't document visits. Novak's the CFO. Claire looked up. "Why would he visit a pediatric patient?" "That's what I wondered. It's not normal. CFOs don't do bedside rounds." Sarah's jaw tightened. "So I checked my notes from other cases. Other times when Dana shut down complaints or pushed for cheaper treatment options, and Novak shows up in a lot of them. Always visiting, always reviewing charts, never documenting. He was monitoring cases that might become legal problems, or cases where cutting costs led to bad outcomes." Sarah pulled the paper back, folded it carefully. "I have 17 instances over the past year where Novak personally reviewed a patient chart after a safety concern was raised. 17 times he showed up, looked at documentation, and then the concern got buried." Claire felt the pieces shifting into place. Dana had been the enforcer, the one who silenced complaints and intimidated staff. But Novak had been the architect, monitoring the financial impact of their decisions and ensuring problems disappeared before they became expensive. "I need you to write all of that down. Dates, times, patient names if you remember them. Every instance you documented." Claire pulled out her phone. "And then I need you to come downstairs and tell Commander Graves exactly what you just told me." Sarah went pale. "I can't. I don't want to get involved in—" "You're already involved. The moment you kept those notes, you documented a pattern." Claire kept her voice gentle but firm. "And those 17 cases? Those are 17 families who deserved better, who might get justice if you speak up. Dana's being processed for federal fraud charges. She can't hurt you. But Novak will be arrested as soon as we have enough evidence, which you're helping us build." Claire stood. "I know you're scared. But Sarah, you reported that medication error 6 months ago because you knew it was the right thing to do. This is the same choice. Just bigger." Sarah stared at the folded paper in her hands. Then she stood too, the motion abrupt and decisive. "Okay, let me grab my tablet. I have digital copies of my logs backed up. Give me 5 minutes." "Take 10. Make sure you have everything." Claire headed for the door, then paused. Sarah? Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Ask me again when I'm not terrified. Claire went back to the stairwell, already pulling up Graves's contact. He answered on the first ring. Talk to me. Richard Novak wasn't just complicit. He was active. I have a witness who documented him personally reviewing charts on compromised cases. Claire took the stairs 2 at a time. She's gathering her evidence now. Should be down in 10. Outstanding. We just found something too. Graves sounded grimly satisfied. Brooks traced J. Matheson. Full name? Dr. Julian Matheson, former surgeon, current CEO of MedLink Healthcare Services. Claire stopped mid-step. The CEO is personally directing fraud operations? Looks that way. We have emails going back 4 years showing him micromanaging everything from billing codes to staffing decisions. He's not some distant executive. He's running this personally. Why would a CEO risk that? He's already rich, already successful. Best guess, control. Or maybe he's funding something else and needs the cash flow. Graves's voice hardened. Either way, he's at the top of the chain. We find evidence tying him directly to the fraud. We can collapse the entire operation. Claire started moving again, faster now. Where is he? Corporate headquarters in Baltimore. But according to his assistant's calendar, he's scheduled to visit Blackridge tomorrow afternoon for a routine facilities inspection. That's not routine. He knows something's wrong. Probably. Which means he'll either be here to assess damage or to destroy evidence. Graves paused. Or to find out who you really are. Claire reached the second floor and pushed through the stairwell door into the corridor. Let him come. We'll be ready. Confident. Prepared. She walked into the conference room, where Brooks had added another 6 folders to the evidence pile. Sarah's bringing documentation on Novak. 17 cases where he personally intervened after safety complaints. Brooks whistled low. That's pattern. That's conspiracy. That's leverage. Graves stood and stretched, his spine cracking audibly. We pick up Novak tonight. Bring him in for questioning before Matheson arrives. Maybe we get lucky and he flips. He won't flip. Claire pulled out her chair and sat. He's been doing this for years. He's committed. Everyone's committed until they're facing 20 years in federal prison. Graves pulled out his phone. I'll coordinate with local PD. Where does Novak live? 10 minutes from here, gated community off Riverside Drive. Claire had looked up every administrator's address during her second week, basic operational intelligence. Security guard at the entrance, but he won't interfere with badges. Good. Graves started dialing. Brooks, pull together everything we have on Novak. I want a prosecutable case before we knock on his door. The next hour moved in that strange, accelerated time that came from adrenaline and focus. Sarah arrived with her tablet and spent 40 minutes walking Brooks through her documentation, her voice gaining strength as she realized how much she'd actually preserved. Claire cross-referenced Sarah's notes with financial records, finding instances where treatment delays Sarah had documented matched exactly with cost-saving directives in Dana's emails. By 9 p.m., they had enough. Graves left with 2 NCIS agents to execute the arrest. Brooks ordered pizza that no one really ate. Sarah sat in the corner with her tablet, going through old logs and finding more instances she'd initially forgotten. Claire's phone rang at 9:45. Unknown number again. Whitmore. Lieutenant, this is Officer Mark Vasquez, Blackridge PD. I'm at Dr. Novak's residence with Commander Graves. Something in his tone made Claire straighten. What's wrong? Novak's not here. According to his wife, he left around 6 p.m. Said he had an emergency meeting at the hospital and would be back late. He's not at the hospital. We've had eyes on all the entrances. Yeah, that's the problem. Vasquez sounded tired. His wife also mentioned he seemed stressed, kept checking his phone. And when he left, he took his passport. Claire looked at Brooks, who'd stopped typing and was listening intently. He's running. That's our assessment. We've issued a BOLO, notified TSA and Border Patrol. But if he had a few hours head start, he could be anywhere. Claire closed her eyes briefly. Thanks for the update. She ended the call and relayed the information to Brooks, who immediately started typing rapidly. If he ran, that's consciousness of guilt. That helps us. Brooks pulled up flight manifests. But it also means he's warned someone, probably Matheson. Which means Matheson definitely won't show up tomorrow. Claire felt the case slipping sideways, the careful plan unraveling. He'll lawyer up and claim ignorance, say Novak went rogue, that he had no knowledge of operational decisions at individual facilities. Probably. Brooks didn't look up from her screen. Unless we can prove direct communication. Sarah spoke up from the corner. Dana kept a burner phone. I saw her use it a few times. She'd leave her regular phone on her desk and step outside with this old flip phone. Both Claire and Brooks turned to stare at her. When did you see this? Claire asked. Multiple times. Always when she was stressed. She'd make a call, have a short conversation, then come back looking either relieved or angry. Sarah frowned, remembering. The last time was maybe 2 weeks ago. She looked really upset after. Threw the phone in her desk drawer hard enough that I heard it from the hallway. Which desk? Brooks was already standing. Her office or the administrative suite? Her office, middle drawer on the right side. They moved fast. Claire led the way to Dana's office, still sealed with federal evidence tape, while Brooks grabbed an NCIS agent to witness. The office looked exactly as Dana had left it that afternoon. Papers scattered across the desk, half-empty coffee cup leaving a ring on a budget proposal, framed certificates on the wall declaring her commitment to patient care and operational excellence. The middle right drawer was locked. The agent produced a small toolkit and had it open in under 30 seconds. Inside, a Samsung flip phone so old it probably predated smartphones. Brooks pulled on latex gloves before picking it up. Dead battery. Chargers probably. Claire opened the other drawers, found one in the bottom left. Here. They plugged it in and waited. The phone came to life with a cheerful startup chime that felt obscene given the circumstances. Brooks navigated to the call log. 12 outgoing calls to the same number over the past 6 months. Last one was, she checked the timestamp, April 19th, 2 weeks ago, like Sarah said. Can you trace the number? Already running it. Brooks pulled out her own phone, forwarded the information to someone. They waited in silence, broken only by the hum of the ancient flip phone charging. Brooks's phone buzzed. She read the screen and her expression shifted. Numbers registered to a law firm in Baltimore, Keating and Associates. Matheson's personal lawyers, Claire guessed? Not personal, corporate. They handle MedLink's legal affairs. Brooks kept reading. But the direct line that Dana was calling? That's Julian Matheson's private office extension, not the general firm number. His personal line. That's direct communication. The agent who'd opened the drawer looked satisfied. That's conspiracy. Brooks was already calling Graves. Commander, we have the connection. Dana's burner phone shows repeated calls to Matheson's private line. Yes, sir. I'm certain. Understood. She ended the call and looked at Claire. Graves is requesting a warrant for Matheson's arrest. Should have it by morning. And in the meantime, we wait. We document. And we hope Novak's stupid enough to try using his passport at a major airport instead of driving to Canada. Brooks carefully bagged the flip phone as evidence. Good work, Sarah. That phone is the difference between charging Matheson with fraud and just making his life difficult. Sarah had gone very pale. When this goes to trial, will I have to testify? Probably. Dana will be there. She'll be in a defendant's chair listening to you tell the truth. Claire kept her voice steady. And you'll be under federal witness protection if you need it. No one's going to let her hurt you. Okay. Sarah didn't sound convinced, but she nodded. Okay. They returned to the conference room. Brooks logged the burner phone into evidence, while Sarah made notes about when she'd seen Dana use it. Claire pulled up the network diagram again, staring at the connections between facilities and shell companies, trying to see what they were missing. Because something felt wrong. Novak running made sense. He was exposed, facing prison, motivated to flee. But why run now? The federal presence at the hospital had been obvious for hours. If he was going to bolt, why wait until evening, unless he'd been waiting for instructions? Claire pulled out her own phone and called Graves. Talk fast, Whitmore. I'm in the middle of coordinating with the U.S. Marshals. Novak didn't run on impulse. Someone told him to go. Matheson. Maybe, or maybe someone else in the network. Someone we haven't identified yet. Claire pulled up the MedLink organizational chart on her tablet. Who's the chief operating officer? A pause while Graves checked. Dr. Amanda Sterling, former hospital administrator, promoted to COO 3 years ago. Where is she now? Another pause, longer this time. Corporate headquarters, presumably. Want me to, check if she's there. Actually confirm eyes on her. Claire felt the pieces rearranging in her head. And check if she has access to the same offshore accounts we found in Dana's files. You think Sterling's involved? I think Matheson's a surgeon. He understands medicine, but corporate finance? Setting up shell companies and offshore accounts and automated fund transfers? Claire shook her head even though Graves couldn't see it. That requires specialized knowledge, someone who understands both healthcare administration and corporate structure. A COO. Graves's voice sharpened. I'll call you back. The call ended. Claire set her phone down and noticed Brooks watching her. You're thinking Sterling's the actual architect. Brooks said it as statement, not question. I'm thinking Matheson's the face, the CEO, the decision maker, the one who takes meetings and represents the company. But Sterling? Claire pulled up the executive bios on Medlink's website. She worked in healthcare finance for 15 years before joining Medlink, specialized in revenue cycle management and cost optimization, which is code for finding ways to bill more and spend less. Exactly. Claire studied Sterling's photograph, a woman in her mid-50s with sharp features and a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. And if she's smart, she's already destroying evidence. Or running. Sarah spoke up quietly. There's a third option. They both looked at her. She could be coming here. Sarah's expression was grim. When Dana had a problem she couldn't solve, she'd make a call on that burner. And twice, someone showed up at the hospital within a few hours. I never saw who, but Dana would disappear into closed-door meetings, and when she came out, the problem had gone away. Gone away how? Brooks asked. Different ways. One time it was a nurse who'd been threatening to report falsified infection rates. She got transferred to a facility 4 hours away and quit rather than relocate. Another time it was a physician who questioned our pharmaceutical ordering practices. He got accused of inappropriate conduct with a patient, completely fabricated, but it tanked his reputation enough that he left quietly. Claire felt cold. Sterling comes to handle complications personally. If she's that hands-on, and if she knows federal agents are here, Brooks trailed off. Claire's phone rang. Graves. Sterling's not at headquarters. Her assistant says she left at 7 p.m. for a personal appointment. Didn't say where. How far is Baltimore from here? Hour and a half. Maybe less if you drive fast. Graves understood immediately. You think she's coming to Blackridge. Sarah says Sterling made personal visits when Dana had problems that needed containing. This is the biggest problem Dana's ever had. What would Sterling do? Evidence is secured. Dana's in custody. We have the burner phone. She doesn't know what we have. She's working with incomplete information, trying to assess and control. Claire stood, started pacing. And if I were her, I'd want to know who broke the case open, who the federal plant was. She wants to identify you. More than that, she wants to understand what we know and what we can prove. She's coming here to do damage assessment. Claire stopped pacing. We should let her. Silence on the line. Then, you want to use yourself as bait. I want to let her walk into a controlled situation where we can observe her, record her, and potentially get a confession if we're lucky. That's dangerous. That's prosecutable. Claire kept her voice level. Right now we have evidence of fraud. We have Dana's testimony if she flips, but she's not reliable. We have the burner phone showing calls to Matheson. But Sterling, if she shows up here tonight, if she tries to intimidate or bribe or threaten, that's active obstruction. That's conspiracy. That's everything we need to prove this runs deeper than one corrupt administrator. Brooks had pulled out her own phone and was typing rapidly. I can have a tactical team here in 20 minutes. Set up surveillance, wire the room, monitor everything. Graves made a noise that might have been agreement or frustration. If Sterling suspects a trap, she won't. She thinks she's coming to manage a crisis. Claire felt her pulse steady into the familiar rhythm of operational focus. She thinks I'm just a nurse who got too curious. She doesn't know I have backup. Until 6 hours ago, that was true. Which is why this'll work. She's operating on old information. Another pause. Claire could almost hear Graves weighing risks and benefits, calculating exposure versus gain. Fine. But you don't engage alone. Brooks stays in the room. Tactical team monitors from the adjacent office. And if Sterling shows any indication of violence, we shut it down immediately. Agreed. And Whitmore? Don't be a hero. You're bait, not enforcement. Understood, sir. The next 20 minutes were controlled chaos. Brooks coordinated with the tactical team while Claire moved specific files and laptops to make the conference room look like an active investigation command center, which it was, but now deliberately staged. Sarah was escorted to a secure location 2 floors down with an agent assigned to keep her safe and away from whatever was about to happen. The tactical team arrived in plain clothes, carrying equipment and medical supply bags that wouldn't look out of place in a hospital. They set up in the adjacent office, running fiber optic cameras through the air vents and placing directional microphones that could pick up a whisper from across the room. Claire changed out of her coffee-stained scrubs into clean ones she kept in her locker. Checked her appearance in the bathroom mirror. She looked tired, stressed, exactly like someone who'd just blown open a federal investigation should look. Good. Brooks wired her with a transmitter so small Claire couldn't feel it once it was taped to her skin beneath her scrub top. If you need us to intervene, say the word overflow. We'll be through that door in 3 seconds. Got it. They settled in to wait. Brooks at the conference table with her laptop, looking every bit the federal agent working late. Claire in the corner with a tablet, reviewing files and making notes. The tactical team silent in the next room, watching through cameras and listening through equipment that cost more than Claire made in a year. At 10:47 p.m., Claire's phone buzzed. Text from the front security desk. Dr. Sterling here to see you. Says it's urgent regarding Dr. Keller. Claire showed the message to Brooks, who nodded. Claire typed back, send her to the second floor conference room. They waited. Claire focused on her breathing, keeping it steady. This wasn't combat. This was conversation, except conversations could be weapons if you wielded them correctly. Footsteps in the hallway. Measured, confident. The door opened without a knock. Doctor. Amanda Sterling looked exactly like her photograph. Sharp features, expensive suit, expression of someone accustomed to controlling rooms. She took in the scene with one sweep. Evidence boxes stacked against the wall, laptops displaying financial data, Brooks in her FBI windbreaker, Claire in her scrubs. You must be Lieutenant Whitmore. Sterling's voice was smooth, professional. I'm Dr. Amanda Sterling, Chief Operating Officer of MedLink Healthcare Services. I came as soon as I heard about the situation with Dr. Keller. Fast response. Claire didn't stand. Baltimore to here in under 3 hours. I was already in the area. A fortunate coincidence. Sterling's smile was practiced. May I sit? Brooks gestured to a chair. Sterling sat with the posture of someone who'd never slouched in her life. I want to be clear from the beginning, Sterling began. MedLink takes any allegations of impropriety extremely seriously. If Dr. Keller was involved in fraudulent activities, we want to cooperate fully with your investigation. Generous? Claire kept her tone neutral. It's simply the right thing to do. We're a healthcare organization. Our reputation is built on trust. Sterling folded her hands on the table. I'm authorized to offer complete access to our corporate records, our financial systems, any documentation you need. We already have access. Brooks said it mildly. Sterling's smile didn't waver, but something shifted in her eyes. Of course. I simply meant that we won't fight subpoenas or delay production. We want this resolved quickly. Why? Claire asked. I'm sorry? Why do you want it resolved quickly? Most corporations drag out investigations for months, years sometimes. Claire tilted her head. But you drove here tonight, hours after the initial action, offering immediate cooperation. That's unusual. I prefer to address problems directly, rather than letting them fester. Sterling's hands remained perfectly still. And frankly, Lieutenant, the sooner we understand the scope of Dr. Keller's actions, the sooner we can implement corrective measures. Dr. Keller's actions, Claire repeated. Singular. As if she operated alone. Did she not? You tell me. You're her boss. You appointed her administrator here. Claire pulled up a file on her tablet. In fact, you personally approved her hiring despite concerns raised during the interview process about her management style. I don't recall. Dr. Novak noted in his evaluation that Keller showed insufficient regard for staff input. Claire read from the screen. But you overrode his concerns and hired her anyway. Sterling's expression remained neutral, but her jaw tightened fractionally. Dr. Novak is our CFO, not HR. I valued his input, but made the final decision based on Dr. Keller's extensive experience. Experience in what specifically? Hospital administration, cost management, operational efficiency. Cost management. Brooks looked up from her laptop. Is that what MedLink calls it when you systematically underbill supplies and overbill procedures? I have no idea what you're talking about. No? Brooks turned her screen so Sterling could see. Because we have documentation showing that every facility in the MedLink network uses the same billing optimization software. Software that was implemented 3 years ago, shortly after you became COO. Sterling glanced at the screen, her expression unchanging. Billing software is standard. Every hospital uses it. Not like this. This software automatically flags certain procedures for upcoding, suggests diagnostic codes that maximize reimbursement regardless of actual treatment. Brooks scrolled through examples, and it was installed network-wide on your authorization. Under advisement from our revenue cycle consultants, everything was reviewed by compliance. Your compliance department reports directly to you. Claire stood, walked slowly towards Sterling's chair. Which means you're both the person implementing the fraud and the person responsible for catching it. Convenient. Sterling met her eyes. These are serious accusations, Lieutenant. I hope you have evidence beyond circumstantial software implementation. We have Dana Keller's burner phone, the one she used to call Julian Matheson's private line. Claire watched Sterling's face carefully. 12 calls over 6 months. Want to guess what they discussed? For the first time, Sterling's composure cracked. Just for a second, a brief tightening around her eyes, a slight intake of breath. Then the mask was back. I wouldn't know. I'm not privy to Dr. Matheson's private communications. Really? Because the call logs show a pattern. Keller calls Matheson. Then within hours, you show up at whichever facility is having problems. Claire pulled a chair close and sat directly across from Sterling. Like tonight. We detained Keller this afternoon. By evening, you're here. How did you even know to come? I received a call from our legal department. Funny. We spoke to your legal department. They didn't call you. Sterling's hands finally moved, a brief gesture of dismissal. Then perhaps it was someone else. It's been a chaotic evening. For you, maybe. For us, it's been pretty straightforward. Brooks pulled up another file. Want to know what else we found? Evidence that you've been skimming from the offshore accounts. Not much, just enough that it wouldn't be obvious in the overall flow. But over 4 years, you've diverted approximately $7 million into personal accounts. The silence that followed was absolute. Sterling stared at Brooks, and for a moment the polished professional facade disappeared entirely. What remained was colder, harder. That's an interesting theory. Sterling's voice had lost its warmth. Do you have proof? Bank records, transfer logs. A very helpful accountant at your shell company who decided cooperating was better than being charged as an accessory. Brooks smiled. So yes, we have proof. Sterling stood abruptly. I think I should contact my lawyer. That's your right. Claire stood too, matching her. But before you go, I'm curious about something. Why? You're already wealthy, already successful. Why risk everything for a few million? Sterling turned and her expression was almost pitying. You really don't understand, do you? This isn't about money. It's about control, power, the ability to shape systems and institutions. She gestured around the room. You think you've won because you caught Dana and you have some evidence? You've barely scratched the surface. Then help us dig deeper. Claire kept her voice level. Tell us how it really works. Why would I do that? Because right now you're facing fraud charges, conspiracy, maybe racketeering if we can prove the pattern extends beyond healthcare. Claire paused. But if you cooperate, if you provide testimony against Matheson and whoever else is involved, that changes your exposure significantly. Sterling laughed. Actually laughed, the sound sharp and humorless. You think Julian is the top? You think this ends with him? She shook her head. This network touches 12 states, Lieutenant, 47 facilities, hundreds of millions in annual revenue. You can't even conceive of how deep this goes. So explain it to me. For a moment, Sterling seemed to consider it. Then she moved toward the door. I want my lawyer, now. Brooks stood. Dr. Sterling, you're not free to leave. We have evidence linking you to... The door burst open. Commander Graves entered, followed by 2 NCIS agents. But what stopped everyone cold was the man being escorted between them, hands zip-tied behind his back, expression somewhere between terror and resignation. Dr. Richard Novak. Sterling went absolutely still. Found him at a private airfield 40 miles from here. Graves pushed Novak forward into the room. Trying to board a charter flight to the Cayman Islands. Had $500,000 in cash in his luggage and falsified travel documents. Novak wouldn't look at Sterling. Wouldn't look at anyone. Dr. Novak has expressed interest in cooperating with our investigation. Graves's voice was utterly calm. In exchange for reduced charges, he's prepared to provide detailed testimony about the MedLink network's operations, including, he paused deliberately, evidence that Dr. Sterling personally ordered him to destroy financial records and intimidate witnesses. Sterling's face drained of color. That's a lie, she said flatly. We have recordings. Novak's voice was barely audible. I kept recordings. Of everything. Every call. Every meeting. Every directive you gave me. He finally looked up, meeting Sterling's eyes. I'm not going to prison alone for this. The room was silent except for the hum of ventilation. Sterling stood frozen, her carefully constructed composure shattered. Brooks was already moving, pulling out handcuffs. Dr. Amanda Sterling, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. Brooks's voice was mechanical, precise. You have the right to remain silent. Claire watched as Sterling's hands were cuffed behind her back, as the woman who'd built an empire on exploitation and fraud was reduced to just another defendant. Sterling looked at Claire once, her expression unreadable. You think this is over, she said quietly. It's not. Then she was escorted out, leaving behind only the echo of her footsteps and the weight of her final words. Graves exhaled slowly. Well, that was productive. Brooks was already on her phone, coordinating with the prosecutor's office. Novak sat heavily in the chair Sterling had vacated, looking 10 years older than he had that morning. Claire's phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Lieutenant Whitmore. This is Julian Matheson. I believe we should talk. She showed the screen to Graves. He read it and swore softly. When it rains, he muttered. Claire typed back. I'm listening. The response came immediately, not over text, in person. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., my office in Baltimore. Come alone. I have information you'll want. She showed Graves again. He's setting terms. Or a trap. Maybe both. Claire stared at the message. But if he's willing to talk, then either he's more scared than Sterling was, or he's planning something we haven't anticipated. Graves pulled out his own phone. I'll coordinate with FBI Baltimore office. You won't be alone, but he won't know that. Claire typed, fine, 9 a.m. The response was instant. Smart choice. This is bigger than you know. The phone went dark. Claire set it down and looked around the conference room at the evidence boxes and laptops and the lingering presence of the people they'd just arrested. Bigger than they knew. Sterling had said the same thing. 47 facilities, 12 states. They'd torn down the local operation, arrested the administrators and the COO. But somewhere in Baltimore, Julian Matheson sat in his office, confident enough to summon a federal investigator for a private meeting, which meant he believed he still had leverage, still had protection, still had cards to play. Claire thought about the network diagram, the offshore accounts, the systematic exploitation spanning years. She thought about Jessica Brennan in her hospital bed and Mrs. Alvarez afraid to ask for pain medication, and every patient who'd received substandard care so someone could pad their profit margins. I'm going, she said it quietly. I know. Graves's expression was grim. Just remember, he's not offering information out of generosity. He wants something. Then we'll find out what. Brooks ended her call and looked at them both. Prosecutor wants Novak's full statement tonight. I'll handle that. You two should get some rest before Baltimore. Rest? Claire almost laughed. Sure. But she didn't argue. Just gathered her things and walked out of the conference room, past the evidence boxes and the federal agents and the empty chair where Sterling had sat. Down the stairs and through the corridor where she'd been fired 12 hours ago. Had it really only been 12 hours? The parking lot was dark and quiet. Her car sat where she'd left it, unchanged while everything else had transformed. She got in, started the engine, and sat for a moment with her hands on the wheel. Her phone buzzed one more time. Sarah, thank you for everything. I know this isn't over, but thank you for making it possible. Claire typed back, thank you for having the courage to speak up. None of this happens without people like you. She pulled out of the parking lot and drove toward the small apartment she'd rented when she'd taken this assignment. Tomorrow, she'd face Julian Matheson. Tomorrow, she'd find out what leverage he thought he had, what secrets he was guarding, what made him confident enough to summon a federal investigator. But tonight, she'd take the win. They'd arrested Sterling and Novak. They'd secured evidence. They'd given Sarah and every other silenced employee a chance at justice. It wasn't enough. Not yet. But it was progress. She drove through empty streets, past darkened buildings, and the occasional late-night business still lit against the darkness. Somewhere in Baltimore, Matheson was awake too. Planning, calculating, preparing for their meeting. Claire wondered what he knew that she didn't. What card he was holding that made him think he could negotiate. She'd find out soon enough. The traffic light ahead turned red. She stopped, waiting in the silence, and in her rearview mirror, headlights appeared, following at a careful distance, not close enough to be obvious. But there. Claire's pulse kicked up. She watched the mirror as the light turned green. She drove. The headlights followed. She took the next right. So did they. Left at the following intersection. They stayed with her. Claire reached for her phone, then stopped. If someone was following her, calling for help would alert them that she'd noticed. Better to lead them somewhere controlled. Somewhere with cameras and witnesses. She headed toward the 24-hour grocery store 3 blocks from her apartment, pulled into the lot, parked under a bright light. Waited. The other car drove past. Didn't stop. Didn't slow. Just a dark sedan with tinted windows that she couldn't identify in the darkness. Maybe it was nothing. Coincidence. Someone heading the same direction. Or maybe Matheson's reach extended further than they'd realized. Claire sat in her car under the fluorescent lights of the grocery store parking lot, engine idling, watching the street where the dark sedan had disappeared. Her phone rang. Graves. You okay? How did you? Tactical team followed you from the hospital. They reported a vehicle tailing you, lost visual when you turned into the store lot. I'm fine. It drove past. Plates? Too dark. Couldn't see. Graves swore. Stay there. I'm sending a unit to escort you home. That's not negotiable, Lieutenant. If Matheson's people are already watching you, tomorrow's meeting is compromised before it starts. Claire closed her eyes. He was right. Understood. 10 minutes. Don't move. The call ended. Claire sat in her car, watching the empty street, and wondered what Julian Matheson knew that made him willing to risk this much. Tomorrow, she'd find out. If she made it to tomorrow. The escort arrived in 8 minutes, 2 unmarked vehicles, 4 agents total. They bracketed Claire's car front and back as she drove the remaining distance to her apartment, a choreography of protection that felt simultaneously reassuring and ominous. The fact that Graves considered this level of security necessary meant the threat was real. Claire parked in her assigned spot. One agent swept the building entrance while another stayed with her vehicle. The remaining 2 flanked her as she walked to the door, their hands resting casually near concealed weapons. We'll maintain position outside until 0600, the senior agent said. Her name was Torres, and she had the kind of calm competence that came from years of doing this work. Commander Graves wants you ready to move by 0630. Briefing at 0700 before the Baltimore meeting. Understood. Claire rode the elevator to the 3rd floor alone, hyper-aware of every sound. The building was quiet, most residents asleep, a few muted televisions bleeding through thin walls. Her apartment was exactly as she'd left it that morning. Sparse, functional, the kind of space that belonged to someone who knew they wouldn't be staying long. She checked the windows anyway. Locked. Drew the blinds. Set her phone on the counter and stared at it, half expecting another message from Matheson. Nothing came. Sleep seemed impossible, but she forced herself through the mechanics anyway. Shower, clean clothes laid out for morning, weapon cleaned and loaded, set within reach on the nightstand. Then she lay in the darkness and waited for her mind to stop racing. It didn't work. At 3 a.m., she gave up and made coffee, sat at the small kitchen table reviewing everything they knew about Julian Matheson. Former surgeon, decorated career at Johns Hopkins before transitioning to healthcare administration. Published papers on surgical outcomes and cost effectiveness. No criminal record, not even a speeding ticket. Married, 2 adult children, owned a house in a Baltimore suburb, and a vacation property on the Chesapeake. On paper, he looked legitimate, respectable, the kind of leader investors trusted and medical boards appointed to oversight committees. But underneath that carefully constructed image was a man who'd built a criminal network spanning 12 states, who'd systematically defrauded Medicare and private insurers, who'd created systems that prioritized profit over patient care and then silenced anyone who questioned them. Claire thought about Sterling's final words, "This is bigger than you know." Matheson's message had echoed it. This is bigger than you know. They wanted her scared, off balance, second-guessing the scope of what she'd uncovered. The problem was, it was working. Her phone buzzed at 5:47 a.m. Graves, change of plans. Meeting moved up to 800. Matheson's lawyer called. Says client has urgent information regarding imminent patient safety crisis. Either genuine or theatrical bullshit, but we can't ignore it. Convoy leaves in 30. Claire was already moving, pulling on the clothes she'd laid out, checking her weapon, running through the mental checklist she'd developed over years of fieldwork. She was downstairs in 20 minutes. The convoy was waiting, 3 vehicles this time, including a tactical van that hadn't been there the night before. Graves stood beside the lead vehicle, looking like he'd slept about as much as Claire had. Matheson's playing games. Patient safety crisis, my ass. He's trying to control the narrative. What's the actual move? Claire accepted the coffee Torres handed her, grateful despite the certainty it would taste terrible. We go early. Throw him off his timing. FBI's already positioned around his building. If he tries anything cute, we lock it down. Graves opened the passenger door of the lead vehicle. You ride with me. We talk strategy on the way. The drive to Baltimore took 70 minutes through sparse early morning traffic. Graves spent the first 20 on his phone, coordinating with what sounded like half a dozen different agencies. When he finally ended the calls, he turned to Claire. Novak talked all night, gave us everything, offshore accounts, shell company structures, names of administrators at other facilities. Prosecutor thinks we can build RICO charges. Racketeering, Claire processed that. That's organized crime statute. That's what this is. Organized, systematic, multi-state conspiracy to defraud federal healthcare programs. Graves pulled up a document on his tablet, passed it to her. Look at the network map Novak described. Claire studied the diagram. MedLink's 7 publicly acknowledged hospitals were just the visible surface. Underneath were 17 more facilities connected through convoluted ownership structures, nursing homes, surgical centers, urgent care clinics, and connecting them all were financial flows that moved money through so many intermediaries it would take forensic accountants months to untangle completely. 47 facilities, Claire said quietly, remembering Sterling's words. Novak says it's closer to 60 if you count the medical equipment companies and pharmaceutical distributors they own. Vertical integration dressed up as independent suppliers. Graves took the tablet back. The fraud isn't just billing, it's the entire supply chain. They buy equipment through their own companies at inflated prices, bill Medicare for the markup, then kick the excess back to executive bonuses through consulting fees. How much total? Novak estimates north of $400 million annually. Over the past decade? Graves paused. We're talking billions with a B. The number was so large it almost lost meaning. Claire thought about Mrs. Alvarez afraid to ask for pain medication, about Jessica Brennan in the ICU, about every patient who'd suffered because resources were diverted to offshore accounts instead of actual care. And Matheson knew all of it. According to Novak, Matheson designed it, The whole structure was his vision: create a healthcare network that looked legitimate while systematically extracting maximum profit through fraud. Sterling was his operational chief, but Matheson was the architect. So why does he want to talk? That's what worries me. Graves stared out the window at the passing landscape. Man like that doesn't invite federal investigators to his office unless he thinks he has leverage. They entered Baltimore just after 7:30 a.m. The city was waking up, commuters filling highways, coffee shops opening, the ordinary rhythm of people starting their days without knowing that a few miles away, a criminal empire was about to face reckoning. Medlink's corporate headquarters occupied the top 5 floors of a glass and steel building in the inner harbor. Impressive. Modern. The kind of architecture designed to project success and stability. Graves's convoy pulled into the underground garage, where FBI agents in tactical gear were already positioned. "Perimeter secure," one agent reported. "Building management is cooperating. We have eyes on all exits." "Good," Graves turned to Claire. "You're wired. Brooks is monitoring from the command van. Tactical team stages here. If anything feels wrong, anything at all, you signal and we move." Claire nodded. The wire was even smaller than yesterday's, a miracle of technology that felt like nothing against her skin, but would transmit every word clearly. Brooks handed her an earpiece disguised as a hearing aid. "I'll feed you information if you need it," Brooks said. "Building schematics, background on anyone who appears, whatever helps." They rode the elevator to the executive floor in silence. The doors opened onto expensive neutrality, plush carpet, abstract art, a reception desk staffed by a young woman who looked genuinely confused by the presence of federal agents. "We're here to see Dr. Matheson," Graves said, showing his credentials. Yes, he's expecting you. Conference room C, down the hall, 3rd door on the right." She pointed with a hand that trembled slightly. The conference room was designed for important meetings. Mahogany table, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. And at the head of the table sat Julian Matheson. He was smaller than Claire expected, mid-60s, fit in the way of men who had personal trainers and time to use them. His hair was silver, expensively cut. His suit probably cost more than Claire made in a month, but it was his eyes that caught her attention, sharp, assessing, completely calm. Beside him sat a lawyer, a man in his 50s with the kind of face that suggested he'd spent his career in courtrooms. He stood as they entered. "Commander Graves, Lieutenant Whitmore, I'm Robert Keating, Dr. Matheson's legal counsel. Thank you for coming on short notice." "You mentioned patient safety," Graves said, ignoring the pleasantries. "What's the crisis?" Matheson spoke for the first time, his voice measured and professional. "There isn't one. That was simply the most effective way to ensure you'd come promptly." He gestured to the chairs. "Please sit. This conversation will be more productive if we're all comfortable." Graves didn't move. "You lied to federal investigators to manipulate meeting timing. That's obstruction." "No, my attorney mentioned a potential concern that required urgent attention. Interpretation is subjective." Matheson's expression didn't change. "But we're wasting time on semantics. You're here because you want to understand the scope of what you've uncovered. I'm here because I'm prepared to provide that information." "In exchange for what?" Claire asked. Matheson looked at her directly, and she felt the weight of his attention. This was a man accustomed to reading people, to finding weaknesses and exploiting them. "In exchange for immunity. Full and complete. For myself and my family." Graves laughed, sharp and humorless. "You're asking for immunity after running a multi-billion-dollar fraud operation? I'm offering testimony that will allow you to dismantle that operation completely. Without me, you have evidence of fraud at 7 facilities. With me, you get access to the entire network. 63 facilities, 47 different corporate entities, offshore accounts in 9 countries. Matheson leaned forward slightly. You get names of politicians who took campaign contributions in exchange for favorable legislation. Regulators who looked the other way. State medical board members who rubber-stamped licenses. The entire ecosystem that makes this possible. We can get that through investigation, Graves said. Eventually. In 3 or 4 years, after burning through millions in legal fees and investigative resources. And by then, everyone involved will have destroyed evidence and fled jurisdiction. Matheson's voice remained calm. Or you can have it all in 3 months with my cooperation. Every transaction documented, every corrupt official identified, Everything you need to prosecute everyone involved. Except you. Except me. Matheson didn't look apologetic. I built this, Commander. I know where all the bodies are buried, metaphorically speaking, and I'm the only person who can guide you through the structure quickly enough to prevent the rest of the network from collapsing and scattering. Claire felt Brooks' voice in her earpiece, quiet and urgent. He's stalling. Check the time. We've been here 9 minutes. He's waiting for something. She glanced at Graves, whose slight nod indicated he'd heard the same message. What are you waiting for? Claire asked directly, Matheson's eyebrow raised fractionally. I'm sorry? You brought us here early. You're making an immunity offer. You know we can't accept without approval from prosecutors and DOJ. You're wasting time deliberately. Claire stood, ignoring the lawyer's gesture to sit back down. What happens in the next few minutes that you're trying to distract us from? For the first time, Matheson's calm facade cracked, just slightly, a tightening around his mouth that lasted less than a second. But it was enough. Graves was already moving toward the door. Brooks, status check on all MedLink facilities. Now. Claire heard Brooks typing rapidly through the earpiece, then her voice tight with stress. Commander, we're getting reports of system failures at multiple facilities. Medical records going offline, financial systems crashing. They're destroying evidence, Claire said. Matheson stood smoothly. I have no idea what you're talking about. If there are technical difficulties. Bullshit. Graves pulled out his phone. How many facilities? At least 12 so far. Looks coordinated. Someone initiated remote wipes of database servers. Brooks's voice was rapid fire now. Our IT team is trying to block it, but they're getting locked out. Claire turned on Matheson. You brought us here to keep us away from those hospitals while your people destroyed evidence. Again, I have no knowledge of... Your knowledge is irrelevant. Graves was already issuing orders through his phone. Get teams to every MedLink facility. Physical seizure of all servers and storage devices. Disconnect everything from network access. Move now. Keating stood. Commander, you can't just raid. Watch me. We have warrants for evidence seizure. If your client's associates are destroying that evidence, they're committing additional federal crimes. Graves looked at Matheson. And you just lost any chance of immunity. Congratulations. Matheson sat back down, and his expression shifted. The professional mask dissolved, replaced by something harder, colder. You still don't understand. Explain it then. The evidence you're trying to preserve? It's already gone. Has been for hours. What you're watching now is theater, minor systems at peripheral facilities. The real data, the offshore accounts, the transaction records that actually matter? Those were wiped the moment Amanda Sterling was arrested. Matheson folded his hands on the table. You have some emails, some internal memos, testimony from Richard Novak, who's facing 20 years and will say anything to reduce his sentence. That's not enough for RICO, not enough for conspiracy. Maybe you get me on some fraud charges, couple years minimum security. But the network? That survives. Because I built redundancy into every system. Claire felt something cold settle in her chest. You wanted us to arrest Sterling. I wanted you to think you'd won, that you'd decapitated the organization. Matheson's voice was almost gentle. You're a good investigator, Lieutenant. Thorough, dedicated. But you were working with incomplete information from the beginning. What information? Sterling wasn't my second in command. She was my fall guy. Everything you found in her offshore accounts, I put it there. Every incriminating email, every recorded conversation. All carefully curated to make her look like the architect while I remained clean. Matheson stood and walked to the windows, looking out over the harbor. She knew it too. That was the arrangement. She takes the risk, takes the blame if anything goes wrong, and gets paid enormously for that exposure. She just didn't expect to actually need to fulfill her end of the bargain. Graves's jaw was tight. You're confessing to framing Sterling? I'm explaining reality. Whether that constitutes confession is for lawyers to debate. Matheson turned back to face them. The real structure of this organization exists nowhere in the files you've seized. The actual decision makers, the people who handle the serious money, you haven't even identified them yet. Then who are they? Claire demanded. That's what I'm offering to tell you. In exchange for immunity, Matheson smiled. You see the position you're in now? Without my cooperation, your investigation ends with some mid-level administrators and a scapegoat COO. You'll make headlines, get some convictions, maybe even feel good about yourselves. But the network continues operating under different names with different fronts. And in 5 years, someone else will be standing where you are, wondering why they can't quite crack the case. Brooks' voice in Claire's ear. He's not bluffing about the data wipe. Our forensics team is confirming massive deletion across multiple servers, started around 600 this morning. Graves heard it too. His expression was stone. Even if we gave you immunity, which we won't, how do we know your information is legitimate? You just admitted to framing Sterling. Why should we trust anything you say? Because I'm not offering trust, I'm offering verification. Matheson pulled a thumb drive from his pocket. This contains encrypted access credentials to the actual offshore accounts, the ones Sterling never knew about. Combined value of approximately $2.3 billion. I can give you access to that money and the transaction record showing exactly where it came from and who authorized every transfer. In exchange for walking away free. In exchange for dismantling something much larger than your current investigation can reach. Matheson set the thumb drive on the table. Your choice, Commander. Small victory now, or actual justice later. The silence stretched. Claire could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on all of them. Everything they'd worked for, Dana's arrest, Sterling and Novak in custody, the evidence carefully documented, all of it suddenly felt hollow if Matheson was telling the truth. We need to verify, Graves began. The windows exploded inward, glass and sound and shock all happening simultaneously. Claire's training kicked in before conscious thought. She was moving, dropping low, pulling Graves down as tactical vests appeared in the shattered window frame. Men in black gear, professional and fast, weapons raised. Federal agents! Nobody move! But they weren't FBI, weren't NCIS. The patches on their vests read private security, and they were aiming at Claire and Graves, not Matheson. What the hell? Graves reached for his weapon. Don't. The lead operative's voice was flat. Hands visible. Now. Claire's mind raced. This wasn't arrest. This was extraction. Someone was pulling Matheson out. You planned this, she said, looking at Matheson. The immunity offer, the thumb drive, all of it was distraction while your people got into position. Matheson was already moving toward the window, where the operatives had secured rappelling lines. I gave you a chance to do this the easy way. You refused. We have the building surrounded, Graves said. You have the building's ground exits covered. These gentlemen came from the roof, and they're leaving the same way, with me. Matheson paused at the window. For what it's worth, Lieutenant Whitmore, you were right about everything that mattered. The fraud, the systematic corruption, the patient harm. You just weren't high enough in the food chain to see who really benefits. Then tell me. Claire stayed low but kept her voice level. If you're leaving anyway, if you think you've won, tell me who's at the top. Matheson considered her for a long moment. Then he smiled. Ask yourself why a federal investigation into healthcare fraud never reached the people who actually set healthcare policy. Ask who benefits from a system that allows this kind of exploitation. And ask why, despite decades of fraud investigations across the industry, nothing fundamental ever changes. Then he was gone, harness clipped to the line, being pulled upward by operatives who moved with military precision. The whole thing had taken less than 90 seconds. Graves was on his phone immediately. Brooks, we have a tactical breach. Matheson's being extracted via roof access. Get eyes on... Commander, we have bigger problems. Brooks's voice was strained. The FBI agents we had positioned around the building, they're reporting an active shooter situation 3 blocks away. Mass casualty event. Every available unit is being redirected. Claire felt the pieces click into place. There's no shooter. It's a diversion. Local PD is confirming shots fired, multiple victims. It's fake or staged or... Claire was already moving toward the door. They're pulling law enforcement away from this location. She ran for the stairwell, Graves behind her. Up instead of down, if Matheson was extracted by roof, that's where the helicopter would be. They burst through the roof access door into bright morning sunlight and the overwhelming sound of rotor wash. A black helicopter was already lifting off, ascending rapidly. Claire could see Matheson inside, watching them through the window. Beside him was someone else, a woman in an expensive suit that even at this distance looked governmental. Claire raised her phone, zoomed the camera, and started taking pictures. The helicopter banked and accelerated, moving fast toward open sky. "Did you get anything?" Graves was breathing hard. "Maybe. Not sure." Claire reviewed the photos. Most were blurred, but one, the last one, showed the woman's face clearly through the window. "Brooks, I'm sending you a photo. Run facial recognition. Priority." She transmitted the image and then looked at Graves. He said, "Ask who benefits from the system, who sets healthcare policy." "Politicians, regulators, lobbyists." Graves was watching the helicopter disappear into the distance. "Take your pick." Someone with enough power to stage a fake mass shooting, to deploy a private tactical team in the middle of Baltimore, to extract a suspect from under federal surveillance. Claire's hands were shaking slightly from adrenaline. She forced them still. "That's not just money, that's institutional protection." Her phone buzzed. "Brooks. Photo match found. You're not going to like this. Tell me." Woman in the helicopter is Diane Voss, Deputy Secretary of Health and Human Services. The words landed like physical blows. Claire stared at her phone, reading the message twice to make sure she'd understood correctly. The Deputy Secretary. Not a lobbyist or consultant or some peripheral figure. An actual high-ranking federal official. "That's..." Graves stopped. Started again. "That's not possible. HHS is supposed to be investigating this kind of fraud, not facilitating it. Unless the investigation is controlled opposition." Claire pulled up Diane Voss's official biography. She's been at HHS for 8 years. Before that, she was Chief Compliance Officer for a major hospital network. "Which network?" Claire scrolled through the bio. Her stomach dropped. "Mercy Health Alliance, which was acquired by Medlink 5 years ago." She went from working for Matheson to regulating him. Graves pulled out his own phone. "That's a conflict of interest at minimum. Only if she didn't disclose it, and only if you can prove she's actively involved in his operations rather than just turning a blind eye." Claire thought about Matheson's words. Ask who benefits from a system that allows this kind of exploitation. She's not just protecting him, she's part of it. Brooks's voice came through the earpiece again. "Commander, we have confirmation. The active shooter report was false. A coordinated hoax using spoofed emergency calls and planted evidence. By the time local PD realized it was fake, the helicopter was gone." "How coordinated are we talking?" "Multiple 911 calls from different phones, fake blood at the scene, even shell casings planted to look like a shooting occurred. Someone put serious planning into this." Brooks paused. "And there's something else. TSA just flagged a private jet filing a flight plan from BWI to Grand Cayman. Passengers listed as corporate executives for a medical consulting firm. One of them is Julian Matheson using an alias. They're running." Claire looked at Graves. "How fast can we ground that flight?" "Not fast enough if it's already cleared for takeoff." Graves was already dialing. "But I can try." He walked away, phone pressed to his ear, voice rising as he spoke to whoever could authorize stopping a private aircraft. Claire stayed on the roof, looking out over Baltimore. Somewhere in this city, Matheson was being driven to an airport. Somewhere in Washington, Diane Voss was probably already making calls to contain this situation. And somewhere in the federal bureaucracy that was supposed to prevent exactly this kind of corruption, someone had decided that profit mattered more than patience. Her phone rang. Unknown number. "Lieutenant Whitmore." A woman's voice, professional and cold. "This is Diane Voss. We need to talk." Claire's pulse spiked, but she kept her voice level. "You're calling the person investigating your co-conspirator. Bold choice." "I'm calling the investigator who's about to make a serious mistake." Voss's tone didn't change. "You have no idea what you're interfering with. Healthcare fraud on a massive scale. Corruption involving federal officials. Systematic patient harm for profit." Claire started recording the call. "Did I miss anything?" "You missed context. You missed the bigger picture." Voss paused. "The healthcare system in this country is broken, Lieutenant. Fundamentally, irreparably broken. Costs spiraling out of control, outcomes declining, access shrinking. The current structure is unsustainable. So you decided fraud was the solution? I decided that radical restructuring requires capital, and capital requires revenue streams that traditional healthcare models can't provide. Voss's voice took on an almost pedagogical tone. Medlink isn't just stealing money, Lieutenant. It's funding research into alternative healthcare delivery models, systems that could actually fix what's broken. But that research requires billions in funding that the government won't provide and private investors won't risk. You're claiming noble intentions for fraud. I'm claiming that sometimes progress requires operating outside systems that are designed to prevent change. Voss sounded absolutely convinced of her own righteousness. In 10 years, when Medlink's innovations have revolutionized healthcare delivery and saved millions of lives, no one will care how it was funded. Tell that to Jessica Brennan, 4 years old, nearly died because your cost-cutting measures delayed treatment. Claire's voice hardened. Tell that to every patient who suffered because you diverted resources to offshore accounts. Acceptable losses in pursuit of a greater good. There's no greater good in letting children suffer. There's no greater good in preserving a failing system that kills thousands through inefficiency and incompetence. Voss's professional tone cracked slightly. You think you're fighting for justice, but you're actually fighting to maintain the status quo. A status quo that's killing far more people than Medlink ever harmed. That's not your call to make. Someone has to make it. Someone has to have the courage to sacrifice the few for the many. Voss paused. I'm giving you one chance, Lieutenant. Walk away from this investigation. Take a transfer. Pursue your career elsewhere. Let this go. Or what? Or you'll spend the rest of your life fighting a battle you can't win. Julian Matheson is already out of the country. Amanda Sterling will recant her testimony. We have leverage on her family that ensures cooperation. Richard Novak's credibility will be destroyed in court, and you'll be left with no case, no evidence that can't be explained away, and a reputation as someone who cried wolf about powerful people. Voss's voice dropped. I can make that outcome better or worse for you, Lieutenant. Your choice. Claire looked out over the city, thought about 18 months of careful investigation, about Sarah's courage and the files they'd seized and every piece of evidence they'd built. Then she thought about Diane Voss offering threats disguised as choices. Here's my choice, Claire said clearly. I'm going to keep investigating. I'm going to document every connection between you and Matheson. I'm going to prove that a federal official used her position to facilitate fraud and obstruct justice. And then I'm going to testify at your trial. Silence on the line. Then, you have no idea who you're threatening. I'm not threatening, I'm promising. Claire ended the call. Graves returned, his expression grim. Flight's already in the air. FAA says they can't authorize forced landing without evidence of immediate threat to public safety. Matheson's gone. For now. Graves looked at her closely. What happened? You look like you want to hit something. Diane Voss just called, offered me a chance to walk away in exchange for dropping the investigation. Please tell me you recorded that. Claire held up her phone. Every word, including the part where she admitted Medlink is funding illegal research with fraudulent proceeds and threatened to destroy my career if I don't back off. That's leverage. Graves' expression shifted. That's actual prosecution-level evidence against a federal official. It's also a declaration of war. Claire pocketed her phone. She's going to come after me. After all of us. Use whatever influence she has to destroy the case and anyone involved in building it. Let her try. Graves gestured toward the stairwell. We've got her on recording threatening a federal investigator. That's obstruction at minimum. And if we can tie her directly to Matheson's operations, we can bring her down too. They descended from the roof, Claire's mind already working through next steps. Matheson had escaped, but they had Voss's recorded threat. They had Sterling and Novak in custody. They had evidence of systematic fraud across dozens of facilities. What they didn't have was time. Voss would be making calls right now, using her position to throw bureaucratic obstacles in their path. Matheson would be landing in the Caymans, beyond extradition. And somewhere above them both, the people who really controlled the network, the ones Matheson had hinted at, were watching and calculating their next move. Claire's phone buzzed as they reached the ground floor. Text from Sarah at Blackridge. Claire, something's happening. Armed men just showed up at the hospital. They're seizing files from Dana's office. They say they're federal agents, but no one recognizes them. Should we be worried? Claire showed the message to Graves. His expression went dark. That's not us. Brooks, get teams to Blackridge now. Someone's conducting unauthorized seizure. On it. Brooks' voice was tight through the earpiece. They ran for the vehicles. The convoy reformed and accelerated out of the parking garage, sirens wailing. Claire called Sarah back. Where are these men now? Still in Dana's office. They're loading everything into boxes, computers, files, even furniture. Sarah's voice was scared. Security tried to stop them, but they showed badges and warrants, federal something. I couldn't see the details. Stay away from them. Get somewhere safe and don't engage. Claire ended the call and looked at Graves. Boss is cleaning house, removing anything that might connect her to Dana's operations. She works fast. Graves was on his radio, coordinating with multiple agencies. We need to beat them to the other facilities. If she's seizing evidence at Blackridge, she's probably hitting every MedLink hospital simultaneously. Brooks' voice crackled through. Commander, I'm getting reports of federal-looking teams at Hartford Medical, Riverside Community, and St. Anthony's, all conducting evidence seizures under questionable authority. Who authorized it? That's the problem. No one can confirm. The warrants look legitimate, but the issuing judge's office says they never signed them. Forged warrants. Claire felt the scope of Voss's reach. She has enough resources to forge federal court documents and deploy tactical teams across multiple states. She has help. Graves's jaw was tight. Someone higher up the chain is protecting her. Has to be. They reached Blackridge 40 minutes later. The hospital parking lot was chaos. Staff gathered outside, security arguing with men in tactical gear, news vans already setting up. Claire spotted Sarah in the crowd and headed toward her. They took everything, Sarah said immediately. Dana's entire office, even pulled hard drives from the IT server room. Did anyone get names? Badge numbers? I tried. They wouldn't identify themselves beyond flashing credentials too fast to read. Sarah pulled out her phone. But I recorded them. Video of the whole thing. She showed Claire the footage. The men were professional, efficient, working in coordinated teams. Their gear was federal quality, but the patches were wrong. Generic federal agent instead of specific agency identifiers. These aren't real agents. Claire forwarded the video to Brooks. They're contractors, private security dressed up to look official. Graves appeared beside them. Local PD just informed me that the warrants are definitely forged. We're filing charges for evidence tampering and impersonating federal officers. But whoever organized this has already disappeared with the seized materials. Claire's phone rang. Brooks. Tell me something good, Claire answered. Can't. Just got notification from DOJ. They're suspending the MedLink investigation pending review by the Inspector General's office. They can't. We have active arrests, evidence in custody. Doesn't matter. Order came from the acting Deputy Attorney General. Effective immediately, all investigative activities related to MedLink are suspended. We maintain custody of arrested subjects and existing evidence, but no new actions. No additional seizures, no further interviews. Brooks's voice was bitter. Estimated review time is 6 to 8 months. Claire felt the ground shifting beneath her. Someone at DOJ is protecting Voss. Someone high enough to shut down a multi-agency investigation with one phone call. Brooks paused. We're being boxed in, Claire. Systematically cut off from every avenue of pursuit. Graves was listening through his own phone, his expression darkening. When he ended the call, he looked at Claire and Sarah. We need to secure what we have, protect our witnesses, and find leverage that Voss and whoever's backing her can't reach. He pulled Claire aside, lowered his voice. This goes deeper than we thought. Someone with serious power is protecting this network. We keep pushing, people are going to get hurt. People are already hurt. 47 dead from infections, hundreds more harmed by inadequate care. Jessica Brennan nearly died because of these people. Claire kept her voice steady. We can't walk away now. I'm not suggesting we walk away. I'm saying we need to be smart, strategic, find the weak point in their defense, and hit it hard enough to crack the whole structure. Graves looked back at the hospital where tactical teams were loading the last of the seized materials into unmarked vans. Right now, we're outgunned and outmaneuvered. We need an advantage. Claire's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She was getting tired of this. What? She answered sharply. Lieutenant Whitmore, my name is Marcus Reed. I work at Hartford Medical Center. I'm a surgical resident, and I have information about MedLink that you need to see immediately. Claire gestured for Graves to listen. What kind of information, Dr. Reed? Evidence of deliberate patient harm, equipment sabotage, systematic infections caused by... His voice dropped. I can't talk about this on the phone. They're watching. Can you meet me? Where are you now? Hartford Medical Parking Garage. Level 3. I've been documenting everything for weeks, but after what happened at Blackridge, I knew I had to reach out. Marcus sounded young, scared, but determined. Please, people are dying because of what they're doing here. Claire looked at Graves, who nodded. We can be there in 90 minutes. Stay in your car. Don't talk to anyone. Hurry! The line went dead. They were moving within minutes, the convoy reforming with tactical precision. Sarah wanted to come, but Graves insisted she stay at Blackridge with protective detail. Brooks coordinated with FBI field offices along the route, establishing surveillance positions around Hartford Medical before they arrived. The drive felt longer than 90 minutes. Claire's mind kept circling back to Voss's threat, to Matheson's escape, to the forged warrants and the systematic dismantling of their investigation. They were being outmaneuvered at every turn by people with resources and reach they couldn't match. But if Marcus had evidence of direct patient harm, not just financial fraud but actual injuries, that changed the calculation. That gave them leverage that couldn't be buried by bureaucratic delays or forged court orders. They reached Hartford just after noon. The hospital was larger than Blackridge, more modern, with the kind of architecture that suggested significant recent investment. The parking garage was concrete and fluorescent lighting, cars packed tight across multiple levels. Brooks's voice came through the radio. Surveillance confirms Marcus Reed's vehicle on level 3. Single occupant. No signs of counter-surveillance or ambush setup. Looks can be wrong, Graves muttered, but he gave the signal to proceed. Claire approached alone while Graves and 2 FBI agents hung back with clear sight lines. Marcus's gray Honda was backed into a corner space, good positioning for someone worried about being surprised. She knocked on the driver's window. Marcus jumped, then visibly steadied himself when he recognized her from the Blackridge incident. He was maybe 28, exhausted looking, with the particular strain that came from too many hours in an operating room and not enough sleep. He unlocked the door and Claire slid into the passenger seat. Thank you for coming. His hands were shaking. I didn't know who else to trust. Tell me what you found. He pulled out a tablet, fingers fumbling slightly as he navigated to a file. I'm a surgical resident. Been rotating through Hartford for 3 weeks. Started noticing infection rates that were way too high. Surgical site infections running about 40% above normal across all procedure types. Claire leaned closer to see the data. The numbers were damning. So I started investigating, checked equipment logs, sterilization records, maintenance schedules, and I found this. He pulled up technical specifications. Every autoclave in the surgical department is calibrated wrong. The sterilization cycles run too cold and too short to actually kill bacteria. Instruments look clean, but they're not sterile. That's criminal negligence. It gets worse. I cross-referenced with other MedLink facilities. Every hospital in the network has the same equipment, same incorrect calibration. Marcus scrolled through more data. And it's not accidental. Someone ordered these specific settings. Someone approved equipment that they knew wouldn't sterilize properly. Who? Marcus highlighted a signature on a procurement authorization. Julian Matheson. He personally signed off on the equipment specifications 2 years ago. Claire felt ice in her chest. This wasn't just fraud anymore. This was knowing deliberate harm. Patients were being infected, some dying, because Matheson had approved inadequate sterilization to save money on energy costs. How many infections total? Across the network? Marcus pulled up another spreadsheet. Approximately 800 surgical site infections over 2 years. Documented deaths from complications. He swallowed hard. 47. 47 people dead. Not from medical error or bad luck. From a cost-cutting decision made in a corporate office by someone who'd never see the patients bleeding out from sepsis. Claire pulled out her phone and started photographing every document Marcus showed her. Why didn't you take this to your supervisors? I tried. My attending shut me down immediately. Said I was overreacting, that infection rates vary naturally, that I should focus on my surgical skills instead of playing detective. Marcus's voice was bitter. The next day, I got called into the program director's office and put on academic probation for performance issues. I've never had performance issues, but suddenly I'm supposedly underperforming, and if I don't improve, I'll be dismissed from the residency program. They're silencing you through career threats. It worked on everyone else. Other residents have noticed things, but no one speaks up because it means destroying your future. He looked at Claire directly. You're the only person who actually fought back. That's why I contacted you. Claire's earpiece crackled. Graves. We have movement. Multiple vehicles entering the garage, black SUVs, professional drivers. This doesn't feel right. Marcus, we need to leave. Now. Claire was already opening the door. What? Why? Because someone knew you were meeting me. She pulled him out of the car. Move. They ran for the stairwell where Graves and the FBI agents were positioned. Behind them, vehicle doors slammed in rapid succession. Claire glanced back and saw men in dark suits moving with tactical precision toward Marcus's car. They reached the stairwell and Graves pulled them through, sealing the door. Down! Go! They descended fast, Graves coordinating through his radio. All units, hostile contact at Hartford Medical. Extracting witness now. The stairwell door above them crashed open. Someone shouted, Federal agents, stop! But the movement was wrong, the positioning too aggressive. These weren't federal agents. Graves raised his weapon. Actual federal agent. Drop your weapons and identify. The response was gunfire. The sound was deafening in the enclosed concrete space, bullets ricocheting at angles that made Claire's training scream danger. The FBI agents returned fire while Graves shoved Claire and Marcus down the stairs. Move! Get the witness out! Claire pulled Marcus down flights of stairs, their footsteps echoing beneath the crack of weapons fire. They burst out onto the ground level into a hospital corridor where civilians screamed and dove for cover. An FBI agent directed them toward a service exit. This way! They ran through the hospital, past shocked staff and terrified patients, the sound of tactical engagement still echoing behind them. Claire's every instinct told her to find cover and engage, but her mission was protecting Marcus and his evidence. They crashed through the service exit into blinding daylight. FBI vehicles were already positioned, agents in tactical gear establishing a defensive perimeter. Graves appeared behind them, breathing hard. Get him in the van! We're blown! Marcus was shoved into an armored vehicle. Claire climbed in after him, Graves following. The door slammed and they were accelerating before it fully closed, the vehicle taking evasive turns through Hartford's streets. What the hell was that? Marcus's voice was high and tight. Those people were shooting at us. Private security protecting MedLink's interests? Graves was on his radio. Brooks, we have the witness. Extraction successful but compromised. Need immediate secure location. Claire looked at Marcus, who was pale and shaking. You okay? Any injuries? No, just... He laughed shakily. I thought you were exaggerating about how dangerous this was. I didn't exaggerate enough. Claire pulled out her phone and forwarded the photos she'd taken to Brooks and Graves. But what you found is critical. It proves knowing harm, not just financial fraud. The vehicle made another sharp turn. Marcus steadied himself against the seat. Evidence doesn't matter if we're dead. You're not going to die. You're under federal protection now. Graves leaned forward. But you're also a target. Those men at the hospital weren't trying to arrest you. They were trying to silence you permanently. Marcus processed that. Because of the sterilization data. Because you can prove Matheson personally ordered equipment changes that directly caused patient infections and deaths. That's beyond fraud. That's manslaughter. Maybe murder. Graves's expression was grim. You just became the most important witness in this entire investigation. The vehicle pulled into an underground facility, FBI field office. From the look of it, secure, defensible. They were escorted into a conference room 2 levels below ground, where Brooks was already set up with laptops and evidence processing equipment. Prosecutor standing by, she said immediately. Wants Marcus's full statement and all documentation. This is big enough to override the DOJ suspension order. Immediate threat to patient safety gives us authority to act regardless of bureaucratic directives. Marcus spent the next 3 hours walking them through every piece of evidence he'd compiled. The data was comprehensive, damning, impossible to explain away as coincidence or error. By the time he finished, the prosecutor was already drafting emergency motions. We can get injunctions to shut down every operating room in the MedLink network until equipment is verified safe, the prosecutor said. Federal judges can't ignore this. We're talking about ongoing patient harm. Voss will fight it, Claire said. She'll use her position to delay, to muddy the waters, to... Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered on speaker. Lieutenant Whitmore. Diane Voss's voice was ice. I warned you what would happen if you continued. And I told you I wasn't stopping. Claire kept her tone level. We have evidence of deliberate patient harm, equipment sabotage, 47 deaths. You can't bury this. Can I? Voss's confidence was absolute. By the time your evidence reaches a courtroom, I'll have deployed crisis management teams to every facility. We'll recalibrate equipment, implement new protocols, issue public statements about our commitment to patient safety. And when your prosecutor tries to prove intent, my lawyers will argue that any calibration issues were unintentional oversights that we corrected immediately upon discovery. We have Matheson's signature approving the specifications. Julian Matheson, who just died by suicide in the Cayman Islands. Tragic. Clearly, he was suffering from guilt over his actions. Obviously, he was a rogue operator who deceived his colleagues and superiors. Voss's voice was smooth, practiced. That will be our narrative, and it will be very difficult for you to disprove. Claire felt cold fury building. Matheson's not dead. You pulled him out of Baltimore in a helicopter. Do you have proof of that? Video evidence? Witnesses? Or just some blurry photos that could show anyone? Voss paused. The Cayman Islands police have a body. Dental records match. Autopsy confirms suicide. Unless you can produce Julian Matheson alive, the official record says he's dead. You killed him. I did nothing except mourn the loss of a troubled colleague. Voss's tone shifted, became sharper. But let's discuss what I can do, Lieutenant. I can make sure Marcus Reed never practices medicine again. I can ensure Sarah from Blackridge loses her nursing license. I can have Richard Novak's plea deal revoked. I can make every person who's helped you regret that decision for the rest of their lives. Those are explicit threats against federal witnesses. Those are statements of fact about how the system works. People who attack powerful institutions suffer consequences. That's not a threat. That's reality. Voss's voice dropped. Last chance, Lieutenant. Walk away. Transfer to a nice quiet posting somewhere far from here. Let this investigation die quietly, or I will systematically destroy everyone who's helped you, and then I'll come for you. Claire looked at Graves, at Brooks, at Marcus, who was staring at the phone with growing horror. Then she looked at the evidence spread across the table, documentation of fraud and harm and systematic corruption that had killed dozens and damaged hundreds more. Here's my reality, Deputy Secretary. I have your recorded threats. I have evidence linking you to Matheson's operations. I have witness testimony. And I have a prosecutor who's filing charges against you for obstruction of justice, conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud, and accessory to manslaughter. Claire kept her voice steady. You wanted to know what I'd do when I understood who I was threatening? Now you know. I'm taking you down. The silence on the line lasted 3 seconds. Then Voss laughed, genuine amusement in her voice. You have no idea what you've just done, but you'll learn. The call ended. Graves exhaled slowly. Well, that was a declaration of war. She started it. Claire set her phone down. We're just finishing it. Brooks was already typing rapidly. I'm sending the recording to the prosecutor. That's enough for an arrest warrant. We can have her in custody by tonight. She won't be that easy to grab, Graves said. She's got security, resources, and advance warning now that we're coming for her. Then we don't grab her. Claire was thinking fast. We isolate her, cut off her support, make it so expensive to protect her that even her powerful friends decide she's not worth it. How? We go public. Everything. Marcus's evidence about the infections, the sterilization equipment failures, the 47 deaths. We give it to every major news outlet simultaneously. Make it so big that Voss can't contain it through backroom calls and bureaucratic delays. Marcus spoke up quietly. If you do that, my name goes public. I become the face of this. Yes. Claire looked at him directly. Your career will suffer. Hospitals will be afraid to hire you. Other doctors will question your judgment. It will be hard, maybe impossible to practice medicine the way you planned. But patients will be protected. Marcus's voice was firmer now. The equipment will get fixed. The infections will stop. Probably. Then do it. Release everything. He met her eyes. 47 people died. That matters more than my career. Claire felt something settle in her chest. This was it, the point of no return. Once they released this information, there was no walking it back. Voss and whoever was protecting her would come at them with everything they had. But 47 people were dead. 800 were infected. And if they didn't act now, how many more would suffer? Brooks, compile everything. Marcus's data, the equipment specifications, Matheson's approval signatures, infection statistics, everything. Package it for media distribution. Claire pulled out her phone. I'll contact the outlets. We release simultaneously in, she checked her watch, 2 hours. That gives them time to verify, but not enough time for Voss to stop it. The next 2 hours were controlled chaos. Brooks built comprehensive media packages with documentation and verification. Claire coordinated with investigative journalists at major outlets, providing background and context. Marcus prepared a statement explaining his findings in clear, accessible language. Graves coordinated with federal prosecutors and law enforcement, preparing for the inevitable fallout. Arrest warrants for Voss, seizure orders for Medlink facilities, emergency injunctions to shut down operating rooms. At 4:47 p.m., the first story broke. Major newspaper, full investigation, Marcus's evidence front and center. Within minutes, every other outlet had published simultaneously. The information flooded across news sites, social media, cable networks. Brooks pulled up multiple screens showing the coverage spreading in real time. It's everywhere, every major outlet, trending on every platform. They can't contain this. Claire's phone started ringing. Calls from reporters, from other investigators, from hospital administrators demanding to know if the allegations were true. She ignored them all, watching the coverage spread. Then Graves's phone rang. He answered, listened, his expression shifting. When he ended the call, he looked at Claire with something like satisfaction. Diane Voss just resigned, effective immediately, cited personal reasons. She's running, Brooks said. Let her run. We know where she lives, where she works, where she banks. U.S. Marshals are moving to arrest her now. Graves pulled up a map showing tactical teams positioning around Voss's home and office. She's not getting away. Claire's phone buzzed. Text from Sarah. I'm watching the news. Everyone at Blackridge is watching. You did it. You actually did it. Then another message from a number Claire didn't recognize. This is Dr. Paul Hendricks at Hartford Medical. I'm the attending who dismissed Marcus Reed's concerns. I was wrong. I have additional information about equipment failures, and I want to provide a statement. Then another. This is Rebecca Martinez, nurse at Riverside Community Hospital. I documented infection patterns for months, but was told to stop asking questions. I have evidence to add to the investigation. Then another, and another. Witnesses coming forward, people who'd stayed silent out of fear, suddenly finding courage in numbers. The floodgates were opening. Brooks monitored the incoming contacts, building a list. We have 17 healthcare workers offering testimony in the past 10 minutes, staff from 6 different Medlink facilities. They're all saying the same thing. They noticed problems but were silenced. Document everything, Graves said. Get statements from all of them. This isn't just about Voss anymore. This is systematic. Claire watched the news coverage evolve. Initial reports focused on the infections and deaths. Then journalists started digging deeper, finding connections between Medlink and political donations, between hospital administrators and regulatory officials. The network was being exposed in real time. Her phone rang. This time she recognized the number, Commander Graves's superior officer. Lieutenant Whitmore, this is Admiral Richardson. I've been following your investigation. Claire straightened instinctively. Yes, ma'am. The Secretary of Defense is asking questions. The Secretary of Health and Human Services, the actual secretary, not the deputy, is demanding briefings. You've created a significant situation. We uncovered systematic fraud and patient harm, ma'am. You uncovered a political nightmare that reaches into multiple federal agencies and implicates senior officials. Richardson's voice was dry. But you also did it by the book. You documented everything. You followed proper protocols. You built a prosecutable case. And now you've forced people who would have preferred to bury this to take action. Is that good or bad, ma'am? Depends on your perspective. For patients, good. For corrupt officials, very bad. For your career? A pause. We'll see. But Lieutenant, whatever happens next, you should know that what you did here matters. It matters a lot. Thank you, ma'am. The call ended. Claire looked at Graves, who'd been listening. That was the closest thing to praise I've ever heard from Richardson, he said. She must be impressed. Or terrified of the political fallout. Probably both. Brooks's computer chimed. Marshals have Voss in custody, arrested at her office. She's being processed now. Claire felt something release in her chest. Not triumph, exactly. More like exhausted relief. They'd done it. Despite the obstacles, despite the threats, despite being outmaneuvered at every turn, they'd brought down a corrupt federal official and exposed a network that had harmed hundreds. What happens now? Marcus asked quietly. Trials, congressional hearings, lawsuits from patients and families, criminal prosecutions. Graves ticked them off. This will take years to fully resolve. And me? You'll testify, multiple times probably. You'll be subpoenaed for depositions. You'll become a public figure whether you want to or not. Graves's expression softened. But you'll also be the person who stopped 47 from becoming 400. That counts for something. Marcus nodded slowly. I can live with that. Claire's phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She was getting tired of these, but she answered anyway. Lieutenant Whitmore. The voice was male, older, cultured. My name is Robert Dalton. I believe we need to talk. Claire's blood went cold. She put the phone on speaker. Robert Dalton, former Secretary of Health and Human Services, current chairman of Vanguard Group. Very good. You've done your homework. Dalton sounded almost amused. I've been watching your investigation with interest. Quite impressive, really. You've accomplished more than anyone expected. Is this where you threaten me like Voss did? Threats are crude. I prefer to offer opportunities. Dalton's tone shifted, became more businesslike. You've exposed significant problems in our healthcare system, problems that need solving. I'd like to offer you a position helping to solve them. You want to hire me? I want to redirect your talents toward productive reform rather than destructive prosecution. You've proven you can identify systemic issues. Imagine what you could accomplish with actual resources and institutional support. You're trying to buy me off. I'm trying to recruit someone who clearly cares about patient outcomes and has the intelligence to understand complex systems. Dalton paused. Diane Voss made mistakes. Julian Matheson went too far. But the fundamental problem they were trying to address, the broken healthcare system that kills thousands through inefficiency, that's real. You could help fix it properly, from the inside, with legitimate funding and support, by joining the people who committed fraud and caused infections that killed 47 people. By joining people who have the power and resources to actually change things, rather than simply punishing those who tried and failed. Dalton's voice was reasonable, persuasive. You've won, Lieutenant. Voss is arrested. MedLink is being dismantled. You've proven your point. Now you can either spend years in courtrooms fighting legal battles, or you can use your knowledge to build something better. Claire looked at Graves, who was shaking his head slightly. At Brooks, whose expression said this was obviously a trap. At Marcus, who looked confused and worried. Here's what I understand about your offer, Mr. Dalton. You're scared. The investigation is reaching up the chain toward people you need to protect, maybe including yourself. You're trying to contain the damage by neutralizing me, either through recruitment or through creating the appearance that I'm compromised. Claire kept her voice level. So no, I'm not interested in your position, but I am very interested in investigating your connection to MedLink and whether you were involved in the fraud Voss and Matheson committed. Silence on the line. When Dalton spoke again, his voice had lost all warmth. You're making a serious mistake. I've heard that before, usually from people who are about to get arrested. I'm not Julian Matheson or Diane Voss. I'm someone with actual power, resources you can't imagine, connections that reach into every level of government and industry. Dalton's tone hardened. If you come after me, I will make sure you spend the rest of your career fighting bureaucratic battles you can't win. Every case you build will be delayed, dismissed, or destroyed. Every witness you protect will mysteriously change their testimony. Every piece of evidence you gather will be challenged by lawyers who cost more per hour than you make in a month. Is that a threat, Mr. Dalton? It's a statement of reality. You've had your victory. Be satisfied with it. Because if you push further, you'll discover exactly how powerless you actually are. The line went dead. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Marcus spoke, his voice small. Who is that? Someone who's terrified, Claire said. And when powerful people get scared, they make mistakes. Graves was already on his phone. I need a full financial investigation into Robert Dalton and the Vanguard Group. Start with connections to Medlink and work backward. I want to know every transaction, every meeting, every communication. Brooks pulled up Dalton's background. Former HHS secretary, current chairman of one of the world's largest investment firms, board member of multiple healthcare corporations, net worth estimated at over $3 billion. And he just personally called a junior military investigator to threaten her, Claire said. Why would someone that powerful risk direct contact unless he's worried about what we might find? Because there's something to find. Graves was nodding. Something that connects him directly to the fraud. Something he thinks we don't know about yet. Claire thought about Matheson's words on the roof. Ask who benefits from a system that allows this kind of exploitation. Ask who sets healthcare policy. Voss was Dalton's protege. He brought her into HHS, promoted her to deputy secretary. What if he didn't just fail to prevent the fraud? What if he helped design it? That would make him the actual architect of the entire network. Brooks was typing rapidly. Let me pull up the timeline of when Medlink started its expansion and cross-reference with Dalton's tenure at HHS. The screen filled with data. Brooks highlighted key dates. Medlink began its aggressive acquisition strategy 6 months after Dalton became HHS secretary. Regulations that would have prevented some of their practices were modified or eliminated during his tenure. Oversight programs were defunded or restructured. He created the conditions that allowed Medlink to operate, Claire said slowly. Then after he left government, he profited from the network through Vanguard Group investments. Classic regulatory capture. Use government position to benefit private industry, then cash in after leaving office. Graves studied the timeline. But proving it requires evidence that he actively coordinated with Matheson and Voss while at HHS. Which Matheson's dead, and Voss will never testify against her mentor. Marcus sounded discouraged. Matheson might be dead, but his records aren't. Claire pulled up the offshore account information Novak had provided. He kept documentation of everything. If Dalton was involved, there will be evidence in those files. Brooks started searching through the financial data. Hours passed as they sifted through transactions and communications, building connections. Outside, the sun set. The news coverage continued. Arrest warrants were executed. Medlink facilities began shutting down operating rooms for equipment verification. And in the evidence, slowly, a pattern emerged. Here, Brooks highlighted a series of transactions. Consulting fees paid by Medlink to a firm called Sentinel Advisory Group. Look at the amounts. $2 million, $3 million, $5 million, all during Dalton's time at HHS. Who owns Sentinel Advisory Group? Brooks searched corporate records. It's a shell company, but the registered agent is... She stopped. It's Robert Dalton's brother-in-law. That's the connection. Graves leaned closer. Dalton was taking payoffs disguised as consulting fees to his family member's company. And look at the dates. Claire pointed to the timeline. Every payment corresponds to a regulatory change that benefited Medlink. New rule allowing facility transfers without recredentialing? Payment. Reduced oversight requirements? Payment. Elimination of certain fraud detection programs? Payment. He was selling policy changes. Marcus sounded stunned. While he was secretary of HHS, he was literally selling favorable regulations. That's bribery. That's corruption of a federal official. That's... Brooks kept searching through the data. That's over $40 million in payments over 4 years. Claire's phone rang. Graves's phone rang. Brooks's phone rang. All simultaneously, all from the same number. They answered on speaker. I assume you found the Sentinel payments. Dalton's voice was calm. Too calm. Congratulations. You're very thorough. Those payments are bribes, Claire said. You took money to change federal regulations in Medlink's favor. Those payments are consulting fees for legitimate advisory services, perfectly legal. I disclose them in my financial reports. The Office of Government Ethics reviewed and approved them. Dalton sounded almost bored. You can't prove corruption just because the timing looks suspicious. We can prove pattern, intent, coordination between payments and policy changes. You can try, but you'll be fighting in federal court against the best lawyers money can buy. It will take years, cost millions, destroy your credibility and your career. Dalton paused. Or you can accept reality. I'm too well connected to touch, too wealthy to intimidate, too powerful to prosecute successfully. You've had your victory with Voss and Medlink. Be satisfied. Voss said something similar right before we arrested her, Claire said. Diane Voss was deputy secretary. I was the actual secretary. We are not equivalent. Dalton's voice hardened. And unlike her, I know when to cut my losses. I'm divesting from Medlink. Vanguard Group is selling all healthcare holdings. I'm retiring from active business management. You'll have nothing left to investigate. Except $40 million in bribes and the policies you changed that enabled massive fraud. Alleged bribes. Policies that had sound public policy justifications. You'll spend years trying to prove what you suspect and end up with nothing. Dalton was quiet for a moment. But I'll give you something. A gift. Because despite everything, I respect what you've accomplished. I don't want anything from you. You'll want this. The sound of papers rustling came through the phone. There's a safe deposit box at First National Bank in Baltimore. Box number 347. It contains documents I've kept as insurance, communications between myself and other senior officials regarding healthcare policy and Medlink operations, letters from senators, memos from White House staff, evidence of how deep this really goes. Claire exchanged glances with Graves. Why would you give us that? Because I'm dying, Lieutenant. Pancreatic cancer. 6 months, maybe less. And I've decided I'd rather those documents be made public than used against me. Dalton's voice was steady. If you're going to investigate corruption in healthcare policy, investigate all of it. Don't just stop with me. Expose everyone who participated. This could be a trap. It could be. Or it could be a dying man's attempt at redemption. You'll have to decide which. Dalton paused. The box is in my name. I've authorized you as secondary signatory. All you need to do is show identification and you'll have access. Why should we trust you? You shouldn't, but you're going to check anyway because you can't afford not to. And when you do, when you see what's in those documents, Dalton's voice grew quieter. You'll understand that what you've uncovered with Medlink is just a symptom. The disease is much worse. The line went dead. No one spoke for a long moment. Then Graves said, "It's obviously a trap." "Probably," Claire agreed, "but we have to check." Yes, Brooks was already pulling up the bank's information. First National Bank, downtown Baltimore. I can have a team there in an hour to secure the location before we attempt access. Do it! Graves stood. And get bomb disposal on standby. If Dalton's offering us something this easily, he's either telling the truth about dying or he's planning to eliminate us when we try to retrieve it. They moved fast, coordinating with multiple agencies. FBI secured the bank. Bomb techs swept the area. Safe deposit box specialists prepared to open the box remotely if necessary. By 11 p.m., they were standing in the bank's vault room, watching through armored glass as a robot arm carefully opened box 347. No explosion? No chemical agents. Just a metal box containing a thick folder of documents. The bomb tech gave the all clear. Claire, wearing protective gloves, carefully removed the folder and opened it. Inside were letters, memos, email printouts, handwritten notes, all discussing Medlink, healthcare policy, and how to structure regulations to benefit specific corporate interests. And the signatures, senators, White House advisors, other cabinet officials, a dozen senior government figures coordinating with Dalton to shape policy in exchange for campaign contributions and consulting fees. This is systematic corruption at the highest levels, Brooks said quietly, reading over Claire's shoulder. This is proof that the problem goes beyond one network or one official. Claire kept turning pages, finding more evidence. Dalton was right. Medlink was just a symptom. Graves was on his phone, already coordinating with the FBI director and the Attorney General's office. This was beyond their investigation now. This required special prosecutors and congressional oversight. Claire's phone buzzed. Text from unknown number. You have the documents. Now you understand. The question is, what will you do with that understanding, RD? She showed it to Graves. He's still playing games even while dying, Graves said, or he's genuinely trying to burn down the system he helped corrupt. Claire looked at the documents spread across the table. Either way, this changes everything. Her phone rang. She answered without checking the number. Lieutenant Whitmore, this is Sarah from Blackridge. You need to turn on the news right now. Claire found a television. Every channel was showing the same thing, breaking news coverage of federal raids across multiple states, arrests of Medlink executives, seizures of equipment and records. And in the center of it all, footage of Diane Voss being led out of a federal building in handcuffs. But that wasn't what made Claire's blood run cold. Overlaid on the footage was a banner, breaking, former HHS Secretary Robert Dalton found dead in apparent suicide. Investigation ongoing. The news anchor was reading from a statement. Authorities found Dalton at his home this evening. Initial reports suggest suicide, though investigators are still processing the scene. This comes just hours after revelations about his potential involvement in the Medlink healthcare fraud scandal. Claire muted the television and looked at Graves. He was dying anyway, Graves said quietly. Cancer, he said. Or he wanted to avoid prosecution and embarrassment. Go out on his own terms before the truth came out fully. Claire thought about the documents Dalton had left them. The timing. The careful planning. He orchestrated his own death to control the narrative, to be remembered as someone who exposed corruption rather than someone who caused it. Does it matter? He's dead. The documents are real. We have evidence against everyone he was working with. It matters because he gets to be seen as a whistleblower instead of a criminal. Claire felt frustrated anger building. He gets to die with some dignity while the people he harmed, the patients, the families, the healthcare workers who lost careers trying to speak up, they don't get that choice. Marcus spoke up from the corner where he'd been watching quietly. But the exposure matters more than his reputation, right? If those documents bring down other corrupt officials, if they lead to real reform, that's more important than whether Dalton is remembered as a villain or a hero. Claire looked at the young resident who'd risked everything to speak up. At Graves and Brooks, who'd supported this investigation despite the personal and professional risks. At the evidence spread across the table that would fuel investigations for years. Marcus was right. The exposure mattered. The reform mattered. Justice for the patients who'd been harmed mattered. But it still felt incomplete. Matheson dead in the Caymans, Dalton dead by his own hand, both escaping accountability. Her phone buzzed one more time. Final message from Dalton's number, probably sent on a timer. You wanted the truth. Now you have it. What you do with it will define whether any of this meant anything. Choose wisely. Claire looked at the documents. At the evidence of systematic corruption reaching the highest levels of government. At proof that healthcare policy had been bought and sold while patients suffered. She thought about Dana Keller's face when the federal systems had recognized Claire's real authority. About Sterling's shock when Novak had turned on her. About Voss's confidence crumbling into threats. About Dalton's attempt to control even his own death. They'd all underestimated the quiet nurse who documented everything. The invisible woman who they thought could be silenced with threats and termination. And now that woman held evidence that could reshape how healthcare was regulated and funded across the entire country. The question was what to do with that power. Claire picked up her phone and started making calls. The first was to the Attorney General's office, the second to the Senate Oversight Committee, the third to the investigative journalist who'd broken the initial Medlink story. By midnight, she'd contacted 17 different people and organizations, ensuring that Dalton's documents would reach everyone who needed to see them simultaneously. No single entity could bury this. No individual could control the narrative. The truth would spread too fast and too wide for anyone to contain. Graves watched her work, finally speaking when she ended the last call. You're not keeping any leverage for yourself. Leverage for what? A promotion? A better assignment? Claire set her phone down. This was never about my career. It was about making sure people like Dana and Sterling and Voss couldn't keep hurting patients while hiding behind institutional protection. You could have negotiated. Use those documents to secure your position, protect your future. My future is secure because I did the right thing, because I documented everything and followed the law. Claire looked at the evidence spread across the table. These documents don't belong to me. They belong to every patient who was harmed, every healthcare worker who was silenced, every family who lost someone because profit mattered more than care. Marcus spoke up quietly. So what happens now? Now the system gets dragged into the light. Brooks was monitoring news feeds on her laptop. Congressional hearings are already being scheduled, special prosecutors being appointed. This is going to reshape healthcare regulation for the next decade. And us? Marcus asked. You testify. Multiple times. You become the face of patient safety advocacy, whether you plan to or not. Claire looked at him directly. Your residency is probably over. Most programs won't touch someone who's publicly challenged hospital administration. But you'll have other opportunities. Patient advocacy groups, government oversight positions, research into medical safety protocols. That's not what I trained for. No, but it's what you're needed for. Claire's voice softened. I know that's not fair. You should be able to be a surgeon and also speak truth about patient harm, but the system doesn't work that way yet. Maybe someday it will. Maybe your testimony helps change it. Marcus nodded slowly, processing. What about you? What happens to your career? I complete this assignment, write my final reports, testify at all the trials. Claire thought about the past 18 months at Blackridge, the double life, the careful documentation. Then I get reassigned, probably to another investigation, somewhere else that needs someone willing to be invisible until the moment they're not. Her phone buzzed. Text from Sarah. The hospital board just announced they're implementing new whistleblower protections. Mandatory reporting systems for safety concerns. Independent oversight of administrative decisions. They're calling it the Brennan Protocol, after Jessica. Claire felt something tighten in her chest. Jessica Brennan, 4 years old, who'd almost died because Dana had prioritized cost-cutting over proper care. Now her name would be attached to reforms that protected other patients. She showed the message to Graves. That's a victory, he said. It's a start. Claire thought about all the other hospitals, all the other administrators who'd made similar choices. One hospital implementing reforms doesn't fix the system. No, but it's more than existed yesterday. Graves stood, stretched. And sometimes that's how change happens. One policy at a time, one hospital at a time, one person speaking up at a time. The next 3 weeks were a blur of testimony and interviews and document reviews. Claire spent 12-hour days in federal buildings, walking prosecutors through the evidence she'd gathered. Marcus testified before congressional committees, explaining equipment failures and infection rates in clear, devastating detail. Sarah provided statements about the culture of silence at Blackridge. The media coverage was relentless. Every day brought new revelations as investigators followed the threads in Dalton's documents. Senators who'd taken campaign money from healthcare lobbyists, regulatory officials who'd approved questionable policies, White House advisors who'd coordinated with industry executives. 3 senators resigned. 5 federal officials were indicted. Vanguard Group's stock price dropped 40% as investors fled. MedLink filed for bankruptcy protection. And through it all, Claire remained largely invisible. The news stories focused on Marcus, on the dramatic congressional testimony, on the scope of corruption being exposed. Claire was mentioned occasionally as the investigator who'd broken the case, but she avoided cameras and declined most interview requests. She preferred it that way. Let Marcus be the face of reform. Let the evidence speak for itself. But on the morning of Diane Voss's trial, Claire arrived at the federal courthouse to find a crowd waiting. Not protesters or media, though they were there too, but patients, healthcare workers, families. An older woman approached as Claire walked toward the entrance. Lieutenant Whitmore? I'm Margaret Brennan, Jessica's grandmother. Claire stopped. How is she? Recovered, physically, at least. Still has nightmares sometimes about the hospital. Margaret's eyes were wet. I wanted to thank you for not letting them bury what happened, for making sure my granddaughter's suffering meant something. I was just doing my job. You were doing more than that. You were fighting for people who couldn't fight for themselves. Margaret reached out and squeezed Claire's hand. Thank you from all of us. Claire looked past her at the crowd. Dozens of people, maybe more, all watching her with expressions of gratitude and recognition. For 18 months, she'd been invisible, the quiet nurse no one noticed, and she'd preferred it that way, had needed it for the investigation to work. But now, standing in front of people whose lives had been affected by the corruption she'd exposed, Claire understood that invisibility had been a tool, not a goal. The point had never been to stay hidden. It had been to see clearly, to document truth, to act when action mattered. And now these people saw her, really saw her, not as someone to overlook or dismiss, but as someone who'd stood between them and harm. "Thank you for coming," Claire said quietly. "Your presence here matters. It shows that patients and families are paying attention, that there's accountability." She walked into the courthouse, Graves beside her. The trial took 3 weeks. Prosecutors laid out the evidence methodically: the offshore accounts, the forged documents, the recorded phone calls where Voss had threatened witnesses. Marcus testified about the equipment failures. Claire testified about the investigation, about 18 months of careful observation and documentation. Voss's defense tried to paint her as a dedicated public servant who'd been deceived by Matheson. They argued she'd acted in what she believed were patients' best interests. They suggested she was being scapegoated for systemic failures. But the evidence was too strong. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Claire was in the courtroom when the verdict was read. She watched Voss's face go blank, watched her lawyers deflate, watched federal marshals approach to take her into custody. Voss looked across the courtroom and found Claire. For a long moment their eyes met. Then Voss was led away, and it was over. Outside, the media scrum was immediate. Claire pushed through without comment, but reporters shouted questions anyway. "Lieutenant Whitmore, how does it feel to bring down a deputy secretary? Do you think this will lead to real reform? Are you satisfied with the verdict?" Claire stopped at that one, turned to face the cameras. "I'm satisfied that the system worked, that evidence mattered, that witnesses were protected and justice was served." She paused. "But I won't be satisfied until every hospital in this country prioritizes patient care over profit, until every healthcare worker can speak up about safety concerns without fear of retaliation, until families can trust that their loved ones are being treated ethically and competently." How do we get there? The same way we got here. People paying attention, documenting problems, speaking up even when it's hard, not accepting that this is just how things work. Claire looked directly at the camera. Change doesn't happen because powerful people suddenly decide to do the right thing. It happens because ordinary people refuse to accept wrong things. Because nurses and residents and families demand better. Because investigators build cases and prosecutors pursue them and juries hold people accountable. She walked away before they could ask more questions. Graves caught up with her a block away. "That was good. Strong message. It was the truth. Truth doesn't always make good sound bites, but that will." He handed her his phone, showing a news alert. "Speaking of truth, the Brennan family just filed a civil lawsuit against MedLink for $9 million, using your investigation as evidence." "Good. They deserve compensation for what happened. 17 other families are filing similar suits. The lawyers are saying your documentation makes the cases almost impossible to defend against." Graves pocketed his phone. "You didn't just expose fraud, Claire. You gave victims the tools to seek justice." They walked in silence for a while. Then Graves said, "I got the call from command this morning, your next assignment." Claire felt something tighten in her chest. "Where?" "Chicago. Major hospital network, similar structure to MedLink. Preliminary indicators suggest systematic overbilling and patient safety issues." Graves glanced at her. "They want you to do it again. Go undercover, document everything, build a prosecutable case." "How long?" 12 to 18 months, probably. Another year and a half of double lives. Of pretending to be just a nurse while secretly investigating. Of watching corruption happen and documenting it instead of stopping it immediately. Claire thought about Mrs. Alvarez afraid to ask for pain medication, about Jessica Brennan fighting sepsis, about Marcus risking his career and Sarah finding courage, and every person who'd suffered because the system protected profit over people. "I'll do it," she said. "You sure? This takes a toll. Living dual identities, constant vigilance, knowing you can't fully trust anyone around you." Graves looked at her seriously. And after Chicago, there'll be another hospital, and another. This could be your entire career, going undercover in corrupt healthcare networks, exposing fraud, testifying at trials. No normal life, no stable relationships, just investigation after investigation. Sounds perfect. Claire meant it. Someone has to do this work. Might as well be someone who's good at being invisible. Graves smiled slightly. You're not invisible anymore. After today, after your testimony, after all the coverage, people know who you are. Good. Let the next corrupt administrator know I'm out there somewhere. Let them wonder if their new hire is really just a nurse, or if she's documenting every policy violation and financial irregularity. Claire felt something settle in her chest. Fear of exposure is its own deterrent. They reached the federal building where Claire needed to complete final paperwork. Graves held the door. For what it's worth, Lieutenant, I've worked with a lot of investigators. None of them had your patience, your attention to detail, your ability to stay focused on the mission even when everything was falling apart. He paused. You did something important here. Changed lives. Probably saved lives, if the reforms stick. That's the job. No. The job is conducting investigations and building cases, caring about the outcomes, caring about the patients and families, and making sure justice actually means something. That's you. Claire didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded and walked inside. The final paperwork took 2 hours. Statements and reports and verification of evidence chains. By the time she finished, it was late afternoon. She drove to Black Ridge one last time. The hospital looked different now. New security protocols, transparent billing systems, patient advocacy offices. The changes were visible even from the parking lot, signs announcing new policies, new oversight, new commitments to safety. Sarah was waiting in the staff break room where Claire had spent countless hours during her assignment. She looked up when Claire entered. Heard about the verdict, guilty on all counts. Yes. Good. Sarah stood and hugged her. Thank you for everything. For listening when I reported that medication error. For believing it mattered even when Dana made it disappear. For making sure the truth came out. You're the one who had the courage to report it in the first place. I just made sure someone was paying attention. Still, Sarah pulled back. You changed things here. Made it safe to speak up. Made it possible to do the right thing without destroying your career. Will you stay at Black Ridge? For now, the new administration is different. Actually responsive, actually cares about patient outcomes. Sarah smiled slightly. And someone needs to make sure the reforms stick, that we don't slide back into old patterns. That's good. That's important. Claire looked around the break room, remembering 18 months of careful observation. This place nearly broke me sometimes. Watching Dana operate, knowing what she was doing, having to wait until I had enough evidence to act. But you did wait. You built a case that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. Sarah's expression was serious. That matters. Quick intervention might have stopped Dana, but it wouldn't have exposed the network. Wouldn't have brought down Voss and revealed Dalton's corruption. Your patience made the difference. Claire thought about that. About the balance between immediate intervention and long-term change. About the cost of patience measured in patients harmed while she gathered evidence. I'm not sure I made the right choice every time, she said quietly. There were moments when I could have acted sooner, could have stopped specific harms instead of documenting them. And if you had, Dana would have called it a misunderstanding, would have moved to a different facility, would have continued the same practices somewhere else. Sarah shook her head. You did what needed to be done. You built something that couldn't be ignored or buried. That's worth the cost. I hope so. They talked for another hour about the reforms and the ongoing investigations and what came next. Then Claire stood to leave. Where are you going? Sarah asked. Chicago, new assignment, similar situation. You're doing it again. Someone has to. I'm glad it's you. Sarah hugged her once more. Be safe. Document everything. And remember that people are watching now. You're not alone in this anymore. Claire walked out to her car as the sun set over Black Ridge. She thought about the first time she'd arrived here, nervous and uncertain, carrying the weight of federal authority hidden beneath a nurse's uniform. She'd been invisible then, overlooked, dismissed by people like Dana who couldn't imagine that the quiet woman checking vital signs might be the one who'd bring down their entire operation. And that invisibility had been her greatest weapon. But Sarah was right. She wasn't invisible anymore. The trials had made her name public. The testimony had established her credibility. The next investigation would be different because administrators would know she existed, would be watching for undercover investigators. Good. Let them watch. Let them implement genuine reforms to avoid scrutiny. Let the fear of exposure drive better behavior. And if it didn't, if corruption continued despite the warnings, Claire would be there, documenting, building cases, ensuring accountability. Her phone buzzed. Text from Marcus. Just got offered a position with the National Patient Safety Foundation. Advocacy and research. It's not surgery, but it's important work. Thank you for showing me this was possible. Claire typed back. Congratulations. You're going to help more patients this way than you ever could have in an OR. I'm proud of you. Another text, this one from Graves. Chicago briefing scheduled for next Monday. Until then, take some time off. You've earned it. Time off. The concept felt foreign after 18 months of constant vigilance. But maybe he was right. Maybe she needed a few days to decompress, to process everything that had happened, to prepare for the next assignment. She drove to her apartment, the sparse temporary space she'd barely lived in while undercover at Blackridge. Most of her belongings were still packed, ready for the next move. She'd learned not to settle too deeply anywhere. But tonight, she unpacked a few things, made the space feel marginally more like home, cooked a real meal instead of grabbing takeout, sat on her small balcony and watched the city lights. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, tired of threats and manipulation, but she picked up anyway. Lieutenant Whitmore, this is Admiral Richardson. I wanted to call personally to commend your work on the Medlink investigation. Thank you, ma'am. You exposed corruption at the highest levels of federal healthcare administration, brought down a network that had operated with impunity for years, gave families and patients the justice they deserved. Richardson paused. That's exemplary service. I was just doing my job, ma'am. You were doing more than that. You were demonstrating the kind of integrity and dedication that defines the best of military service. Another pause. I'm recommending you for promotion. The secretary agrees it should come through within the month. Claire processed that. Promotion meant more responsibility, higher profile, potentially less field work. I appreciate that, ma'am, but I'd like to request that I remain in investigative operations. The Chicago assignment is yours if you want it. Promotion doesn't mean pulling you from the field. It means giving you more authority and resources to do the work you're already doing exceptionally well. Richardson's voice warmed slightly. You've proven you can handle complex, long-term investigations. We need that capability. The corruption you exposed at Medlink, that exists elsewhere. In other hospitals, other industries, other systems. We need people willing to dig into it and bring it to light. I'm willing. I know, that's why I'm promoting you. Richardson paused. Take a few days? Rest. Then briefing on Monday for Chicago. And Lieutenant, well done. The call ended. Claire sat on her balcony, phone in her hand, thinking about everything that had happened. 18 months ago, she'd walked into Blackridge General as a nurse no one would remember. Tonight, she was being promoted for bringing down systematic corruption that had reached the highest levels of government. The invisible had become visible. The overlooked had become essential. The quiet nurse had changed the system. And somewhere, in hospitals across the country, other nurses and residents and healthcare workers were watching. Learning that speaking up mattered, that documentation created accountability, that one person refusing to accept corruption could trigger avalanches of change. Claire thought about Dana's face when the federal systems had recognized her real authority, about Sterling's shock when the carefully constructed fraud collapsed, about Voss being led away in handcuffs after threatening to destroy everyone who opposed her. They'd all underestimated her, had looked at the quiet woman in scrubs and seen someone powerless, someone who could be fired and forgotten. They'd been catastrophically wrong, but more importantly, and this was what mattered most, the patients hadn't been forgotten. Jessica Brennan's name was now attached to safety protocols. The families who'd lost loved ones to inadequate care were getting compensation and answers. Marcus was moving into advocacy that would protect countless future patients. The corruption had been exposed. The criminals had been punished. The system had been forced to change. Not perfectly, not completely. There would be other medlinks, other corrupt networks, other administrators who prioritize profit over people. But now they knew someone was watching, someone was documenting, someone would hold them accountable. Claire finished her coffee and went inside. She had reports to finalize before the Chicago assignment, evidence to organize, lessons learned to document for the next investigator who might need them. But first, she pulled out her personal journal, the one she kept separate from official records, and she wrote, "They thought being invisible made me powerless. They were wrong. Being invisible meant I could see everything while they saw nothing. Being overlooked meant I could document truth while they performed lies. Strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, patient, methodical. The strength to watch injustice and not react immediately, but to build the case that ensures lasting accountability. 47 people died at Medlink facilities. I can't bring them back, but I can make sure their deaths meant something, that the exposure of what killed them prevents future deaths. That's not victory. Victory would be a system that never allowed this corruption in the first place. But it's progress, and sometimes progress is all we get. Chicago starts Monday. Another hospital, another network, another chance to protect patients from people who see them as revenue streams instead of human beings. I'm ready." She closed the journal and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, administrators were cutting corners, falsifying records, prioritizing profit, silencing anyone who questioned their decisions. And somewhere out there, nurses and residents and patients were suffering because of it. But they weren't alone anymore. They had someone watching, someone who understood that being underestimated was temporary, but documentation was permanent. Claire Whitmore had been fired, humiliated, dismissed as insignificant. And in response, she'd dismantled a multi-billion-dollar criminal network, brought down federal officials, and changed healthcare oversight policy across the country. The next corrupt administrator who looked at a quiet nurse and saw no threat would learn the same lesson Dana Keller had learned. Sometimes the people you don't notice are the ones who notice everything. Sometimes the woman you fire is the one holding federal authority. Sometimes the invisible person is the most powerful person in the room. Claire smiled slightly, turned off the lights, and went to bed. Monday was coming. Chicago was waiting. And somewhere in that city's hospitals, patients needed someone willing to fight for them, especially when that fight required patience and silence and the kind of strength that powerful people never see coming until it's too late. She'd spent 18 months being underestimated. She'd spend the next 18 months proving again that underestimating quiet people was the most expensive mistake anyone could make. Because the system could ignore voices raised in anger, could dismiss accusations made in desperation, could bury complaints filed through official channels. But it couldn't ignore evidence carefully documented over months. Couldn't dismiss patterns proven through meticulous observation. Couldn't bury truth when it was built with patience and precision and the absolute refusal to accept that corruption was simply how things worked. Claire closed her eyes, already planning the Chicago assignment, already thinking about which hospital, which department, which identity she'd assume, already ready to be invisible again. Because being invisible had never been about weakness. It had been about seeing clearly, acting decisively, and ensuring that when she finally stepped into the light, she carried enough evidence to illuminate every dark corner of the corruption she'd witnessed. Dana had asked if Claire was sure about being fired, sure about walking away quietly. Claire had been sure that this moment would come, sure that the truth would matter, sure that patience would be rewarded with justice. And she'd been right. The quiet woman in coffee-stained scrubs had brought down an empire, and she was just getting started.